Hello, 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 hello.
Guess who's back?
Back again.
For meeting number 56, the development of Portal Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And this is.
Thought of a title for the book?
The book is temporarily titled Portal Mountain: The Quest for Coherence.
Okay.
That's
So it
the
doesn't
working title.
It doesn't say anything to anybody really.
Quest for Coherence.
That's
Not really.
It's a very nebulous
No.
sort of.
But the more you try to say about it, the worse probably reaction you're going to get against it. So it may be better to remain nebulous.
Which
for
quest?
coherence.
What's coherence?
Yes. Yeah. So it's so these dev meetings 56. This will be 56. We've been going for a couple years now, miraculously, almost every couple weeks. These are casual meetings, of course. We have our beers going, so we're having a little bit of fun and enjoyment on our Sunday. This is our church, one of our churches.
Yeah. Well, for me it's one for now.
Yep. And so we've been discussing basically for a year now, I think. I think we started early 2022. So now we're into January 23, and we've been discussing the creation of a book, which is kind of like the culmination of the last 4 or 5 years of Portal Mountain, but plus years of like our collaboration from which Portal Mountain sprang.
Mm-hmm.
So we are now on this book arc in our dev meeting, trying to get this book down, consolidate everything into like a
story.
Sort of a milestone. Yeah, story.
A narrative.
Sure, an arc, something understandable.
Yeah. Arc is a nice word for it. There was a shower thought I had very recently, which kind of restates the obvious, but I guess I haven't said it explicitly before.
Right.
In that everything, like we're a narratological species, if you will, in that we convey information through storytelling. More evident, of course, in
Right.
pre-civilization, and
Well, because we're living in space and time.
right.
Space moves through time.
But yeah, so the idea of this book is to really nail down concrete narrative that can be told and retold.
Right, to kind of initiate, if you will, basically.
I would even argue that it shouldn't be a static narrative, in that it shouldn't be told the same way every single time.
Right.
But
And that's
a different point, though.
maybe an aside, but it's built into the model, the assumptions of the model, which we've
Right.
been developing. And that is that even though it looks like a computery type language, it's meant to be taken and used in a translated way to whatever context, whatever culture you're trying to
Comfortable
use
with,
it
yeah.
in. It's meant to be taken, almost never used word for word as our definitions that we use, like.
Right.
But as a way that somebody can gain a whole picture of this internally at least, and then move forward from that, translating.
You could say I've been sort of on this path that I set for myself to kind of find a lot of different words rather, that are neutral enough to be taken up by many different contexts and understood within them as a different iteration of whatever context they're finding themselves in already. So like word substitution, if you will, right?
Mhm.
Like the point being is not the which specific word is being used, but what is being used for, being the real goal here. And the words that we've landed
Right.
on are hopefully the most unassuming in some sense, are words that are from the scientific context, and then we've done a lot of appropriation for the mythological context as well. Those are basically our two extremes in which we are combining our presentation. But yes, to your point, it's supposed to be very retranslatable, and the version of it that we have settled on is meant for is really meant to be the most easiest translatable out of kind of language, right? Like very unassuming, very basic, very everyday kind of words that could be taken one way or another in different contexts. Seeing that word a lot.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, a small
trying to fit the screen here a little bit.
A small tangent for our audiences is that I'd like to give a small apology to the way I generally ramble on. It does seem like I don't acknowledge feedback in the way I respond when I'm on a roll.
Mm-hmm.
So it's first of all an apology to you for leaving you kind of sort of
Seeming unacknowledged sometimes.
right, and I just wanted to acknowledge that, and to say that in my own way I do actually acknowledge. It's just that I have a difficulty sometimes in reflecting that back. So I recall an instance in which I was talking. You interjected with something, and it seemed like I just kept talking, without skipping a beat, essentially, even though you said something in the middle of that. So
Right.
what it looks like to the outside is that I ignored you, and I assume it looked like that to you as well. But it wasn't the case that I ignored. It was just I didn't do the due diligence in acknowledging the fact that you said something in the first place.
Right.
And that is a fault of mine that I will try to navigate better.
Probably as a matter of skill and capacity, to juggle so many thought streams and to take care of the environment at the same time.
Yeah, and to circle back, it's actually kind of practicing what I'm preaching in a sense, because one of the things that occurs to me is that the domains of progress sort of encapsulate this situation in which one can become aware of the circumstance, but then they have to discipline themselves into how to approach, react
Mm-hmm.
to that circumstance. And so, quite clearly, I have some awareness, but I like the discipline component in that
Mm-hmm.
regard. And so,
Right.
it just comes back to the model in the sense of how difficult it is to be properly interactive with other people
Mhm.
when you don't have the tools to articulate these things.
Discipline is a learning process, I guess, of patching on heuristics of how not to break constraint and all that.
Well, I'm kind of also tooting my own horn here about the model, in that it's literally giving us an explicit
Mm-hmm. The modes, or what do you call that? The
domains of
progress, right?
that this is where the difficulty lies. This is how to approach it, right? Like if it's a matter
Right.
of, it tells me it's a matter of discipline, which confirms the model from my perspective to me.
Mm-hmm. And if you become aware of the problem in the first place, then you can do something about it. But being aware isn't the same as fixing it.
And also it's the choice of terms for the domains of progress. It verifies them as being something to
Mm-hmm.
that's the feedback I'm getting from it, is that those were correctly chosen terms and a correctly chosen
Yep.
apprehension of the situation.
Yeah, we do have a dynamic, tense dynamic, you could say, in a way, in that I'm always often trying to push things towards a concrete, action, let's build something, whereas you're more trying to get the archetype settled down so that whatever we do build is actually going to stand the test
yeah.
of time, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of, and this is actually great, and like, if it weren't for our temperament, like not temperaments, but our in the classical sense, like I'm very patient for one. I think you're quite patient-ish. Like that, we have enough patience to get over it.
I have another. My patience has also another discrepancy. I'm more patient than I seem. Like the point at which I lose patience is actually very obvious to people that know me, but to anybody coming from the side, they wouldn't see.
Yeah,
They
the
wouldn't
veins
really.
start bulging out.
Well, there's a distinct switch from me acknowledging the person and just like latching on to just no, like that's not happening. Like there is a switch. It's not obvious,
Yeah.
but it's there.
So, anyways, it is
It's
it is a very productive, I think, what you'd call it, productive kind of relationship that we've been able to forge during these meetings and all this time. Like it is hella productive.
And what I like about this is that it also verifies a couple of other things we said with regards to the order chaos setup where it switches.
Let's get this shared. Yeah, if you want to explain that again.
We did that in the previous.
Just how what you say looks like chaos to me while I'm trying to inject order, and what I say looks like chaos to you while you're trying to inject order.
Right.
Because I'm coming from the concrete, you're coming from the abstract. It's like two different.
And the funny thing is that you said it in the abstract. I'm going to say it in the concrete. Is that everything I tend to conjure and bring up to what you're saying seems tangential to you, and everything that you say to me seems tangential.
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 Tangential. Chill.
Tangential.
There you go.
Tangential.
Tangential.
Sorry. But yeah, that's a weird word. Bleh.
Yep.
So the point being there is that it's not that we're talking about actual tangents, is that the model spreads out and it comes back into itself in so many different variations that if you hone in on one, it looks like it's spreading out. To me, it looks like it's consolidating in. But another point looks like spreading out, but it's consolidating in a different way.
Right.
So we're circling around a single concept constantly, and yet elements that I discuss again seem outside the topic that you're landing on because it's concrete and I'm abstract, like you were saying. So, yeah, it's a kind of it's an interesting thing to discuss, simply because it's one of those situations in which we're kind of seeing the very same phenomena that we're trying to discuss in the discussion of those phenomena. Right? So we're seeing the very dynamic being discussed and all of its ugliness, if you will, or all its disorienting facets, by talking about why it's all disorienting to begin with, and trying to consolidate that very same subject. So we're just seeing this consolidation and decay archetypical
Clear as mud.
movements. Yeah.
Yeah, we're always in a mess. There's always a mess here. But we are, as far as I can tell, concretely moving towards like specific goals, and they keep getting closer and closer. So here we are, and we were talking last time, and just on the drive here, how this could be the last meeting of the Heart of the Guild, which is of the book. It's like a subsection of the book discussion, which took place last year.
Or a potential title, maybe.
What title? Heart of the Guild? No, that's good. Yeah.
It sounds like it's like.
I like the word guild. It should definitely be in there.
And heart.
Yep.
Just Sorry,
the heart
I'm
of
being
the
all
guild.
dramatic.
So
Shit, I need to be right back. I'm sorry.
it is dramatic, though. It is all the meta schedule and all that, and people working together, demand and supply, building bigger things.
Maybe because we discussed tall order, we can fit in something about flat order.
Yeah, we should catch up with a couple weeks discussions too. But before we do that, we will take a short break.
Hello.
So, what?
Just wanted to comment on the whole clear as mud thing. I oftentimes don't filter out uh, thoughts that have to do with our conversations outside of the meeting.
Yeah,
So it's
that's
not
context.
So that's why they're not like really meant to be conveying something specific to the audience, which isn't. I kind of float between those two states of where
Yeah,
I'm just
I'd
talking
like to
to you.
not. I'd like to not do that, but I mean, we would.
But part
It'd
of
be
it,
so much more work.
It is, but part of it, I think I need to go on record saying something to you, so that when you're looking back through all the transcripts, you have some extra,
Sure.
extra tools to work with.
That's fine.
So it's not that I'm ignoring the audience, it's just that sometimes not everything I say has a direct relationship to what has been said. Except in this case, if you were to refer back to our previous video about where we tried to really nail down order and chaos, what I was saying just now should piggyback on that.
Mm.
So it's a kind of like another discrepancy that I have, that I will bring up information that is outside of the recorded meeting.
Yeah, we had this chart up a lot
Yeah.
last time, right?
Yeah.
And we were walking through, I think, some of these archetypes, right?
Yeah.
I think we did a walkthrough, almost a full walkthrough. I think we ended at machine or something, but
we tried to give like the bottom up description for the primordial, and then we went across to sort of demonstrate how would this archetype present itself within each reiteration, I guess it would be.
mm-hmm.
So we did that. I don't think we covered the fact that personal is mapped to the entire human archetype, corporate is mapped to the entire corp archetype, and state is mapped to the entire state archetype. So I don't think we've done that. But that's another bit of information that we need to sort of understand.
It's weird that there isn't a machine stack, though.
Because that means that these three columns of stacks actually don't exist in their own ether. They are actually in the primordial stack to begin with. We just don't have clearer definitions for the other stacks.
Couldn't you, like...
So what I'm saying is that all of this is inside this. All of this is inside
Yeah,
this.
where's machine now?
That's what I'm saying. Machine is in guilds.
Where?
Oh, machine is here.
Why is it skipped? Why doesn't it have a stack?
Because it is what it never did.
Well, that's no good.
Why?
Because I'm normalizing. Why do you go human and then skip machine?
Because
And then skip
because
fiat.
machines are not living. Fiat is non-living. It's just something that's thrown into the environment, and then you start again with the organization of corp and then the organization of state.
Yeah.
And on the one hand you have
So these are things that holistically care about themselves,
Yeah.
basically.
the machine.
Okay,
Machine
that's fine.
machine and fiat are arbitrary in this sense, whereas these three in particular is where all of the meta-narrative stuff happens.
Right. So...
So I don't know why it's highlighted.
yeah, I don't know.
That's my
By
that would be
accident.
my only comment there.
Just accident. Yeah, so we were going to driving towards these offices as if each of these squares can be represented by an office.
You know what? No. I know why machine is highlighted. Because if you look at it, this is the machine.
Yeah, well, that's when I'm saying I'm trying to normalize. That's what I'm talking about. Why
So
do we
yeah.
have 4 stacks, 4 things highlighted?
So the primordial is the mechanism itself.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So this stack is the machine.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah, I was hoping for that. I was gonna say, is it machine personal maybe or whatever, but oh, you blew on the camera.
My bad, guys.
You blew your smoke on it.
My bad. I am not a good screen personality. I'm
You
like
ruined it.
I'm one of the people they don't want on screens.
Mm-hmm. Too bad for them. They will just have to deal with it.
They. By they, I mean
The other.
yeah. What I'm saying is that I don't fit the stereotype of a TV personality. So it would be harder for me to be on broadcast media
Yeah.
as opposed to other people.
Yeah, me too. But we can do it. I can think it through. I can work my way through. We can do anything pretty much. So we were driving towards these corporate office ideas. This idea that for every guild in existence, let's say a gardening guild, or whatever, a household,
Proximity guilds.
your own body, like all these things that can be it's like a whole on being taken care of.
So in this case, you're referring to the proximity guilds.
Yeah, yep.
Because the other ones already have a structure. So this is the structure for these.
Right. Yeah, so when you have an actual existing thing, so.
I just said something.
Hmm. You thought of something?
Yeah, we had a conversation in the previous video as to how to fit the two stacks together. We have a natural guild stack, and we were saying it's more about constraining, and then we have this stack that's more about exploring.
Decay.
Well, consolidation and decay. I was talking about constraint and process, or execution rather. The other two stacks have a structure, but we've kind of left the proximity guild structure nebulous. We have 4 categories of it, but what's inside is nebulous. This is the stack that goes inside those. So that's what gives us structure on the proximity guild side.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a missing
Yeah.
a concrete connection in the model for it, but there it is.
So that's good. I don't know if that's been put anywhere, said anywhere.
It just hit me,
But
just now.
yeah, like I mean, I've been driving towards
Even though I
this
knew-
stack, the offices as being how does a proximity guild actually take care of itself?
Right. This is that structure. That's what it's for.
Right. So, so you've got all these different offices. Every guild, every proximity guild, needs to take care of an entire stack. Most of it's going to be implicit. If it's just one person taking care of it, they're going to be like, forgetting half of this
Jack of
stuff.
all trades,
and
basically.
just taking care of
Well,
shit on fire.
This isn't the point of where the person is supposed to forget about it. This is where education on the stack helps shape the DNA of all the
Right.
proximity guilds.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an ongoing process of learning about the structure of the guild in order to have them sustain. If you create a proximity guild and invite some people and do stuff, when it falls apart, you'll know why. It's because this wasn't followed.
One of the
So
archetypes is neglected.
You'll be able
yeah.
to describe the failure using this stack. That's kind of
At least ideally. That's the goal here.
you should be able to, because it takes care of everything from bottom to top, from chaos to order.
As far as we can tell, I mean, our exposure to the feedback of this is actually limited because we are very, very resource bound. As far as we just don't have enough time for this.
9 to 5s, family.
Yeah, but that's the driving idea, and if it needs augmentation, it will get augmentation. But we got a base. We have to start somewhere, and this is our literally our best shot at it right now.
Right.
So we're not saying that this is like a set in stone theory or whatever.
No.
It's an idea,
But-
and it's subject to feedback and observation.
This is what exactly we're trying to feed this model back into itself as much as possible to test it out, even talking it through and doing scenarios in your head. That is still like an implementation of a model.
And what we've found is that this implementation fits into those models almost, well, quite beautifully actually. That's been our conviction all along as to why we're still pushing ahead,
It seems to keep working.
and it seems to never stop. Like here, my experience with observing feedback of the model is more model. Like, that's been my experience. So the more this is what led me to actually talk about the concept of the model is supposed to be the language in which you talk to yourself with.
Mhm.
It's very much like in mathematics, where if you ask it a question, it gives you a response, right? Like it's not like it's almost like a living thing unto itself. W- In math, you set up your axioms, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then and you set up your scenario, and you ask it a question: what would happen if? Right? Like that's the whole idea behind mathematics. What like it, you set up a scenario and you ask a question of like what would happen if, and the mathematics answers back. It's a kind of language that doesn't require a secondary participant, if you will. Model is pretty much like that. You
Mm-hmm.
ask it a question and it answers back. It's a weird way to say it, I know, but that's what drove me to the notion of like this is supposed to be the language of your internal monologue. And if you combine your internal monologue with this language and do the translations of terms back out, the conversation between two people and the conversation between the person and themselves will have no difference.
Hmm.
Or more of an artful difference rather than a concrete, solid
Right.
obfuscation
Yeah, and there's
style.
many facets to the model, but it comes to mind like dream and moment kind of stuff, like just how your experience is being constructed moment to moment, how we tend to get trapped into dream when it gets reified, and we're then projecting out on to the world
Hmm.
our idea of reality. How most people are stuck in that mode and can't see that they're they've been taught something from since childhood, and they keep going with that.
Stuck is a strong word. Stuck implies um, no releasing mechanism. There is a releasing mechanism though, in this sense. The stuck part is something like a very old idea we had is the autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that they're stuck. It's that autopilot seems normal, right? Like it's a rewarding. It's almost like a positive feedback loop that can be broken, but so it's stuck but not stuck. You know what I mean? Like there is a
Mm-hmm.
it has the mechanism within itself to be unstuck. That's the notion I have. I don't know how
So
to
I
articulate
find
it
it
well.
interesting. I don't think we really got into it too much yet about speaking with yourself using model speak, and how all conversations are really with ourself.
I think I said before, like years ago, but this is the first time I've combined it with terminology and took it all the way through to awareness from implicit explicit, with the extreme explicitness being awareness. That's like my thought from 2 days ago. Implicit meaning we already do this anyway, we just don't have the um, skill to create a language to make it explicit, right? This language is model speak, and if you take it to the extreme of being completely explicit, so you only speak to yourself in model speak,
Now,
that is awareness.
we need to, I think, bring in coherence here, because the conversation as a quality, which I think is different between participant and member.
Sure. So I mentioned degrees of coherence, um, of which awareness is the first stage. So awareness gives to discipline, discipline to routine, routine to insight, right?
It's not routine.
If you pull up the domains of progress, I'm pretty sure discipline, a fully enveloped discipline is in a routine. One is routinely
That can't be
engaged
it,
in
though. I
that.
know, but there must be something else. We can look it up, but
The idea being of integrating it further. So awareness is the first stage of integration of something. It's just becoming, it's apparent to you.
it's not. No, not
But then
conviction.
you work with it. That's how it was. I mean, look up the glossary.
Uh,
I'm pretty sure my memory is correct. If you want to contend the terms, though, sure.
no, just glossary.
You're just gonna refresh memory.
Yeah,
Okay.
just because those 4 terms are, I mean,
We don't use them a lot. I know that much.
but it's just bugging me now. So, not
No.
domains. Accountability.
So,
Ah.
I'm wrong.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Hmm.
I'll be right back. I'll be right back.
I knew something was twisted.
I need to get my. But discipline is in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And with that, we will be right back. Yeah. So wait, hold on. If I may. So we've got the domains of progress, which is not insight, awareness,
Mhm.
accountability,
Yes.
then discipline, then insight, and there's a big divide here. So when we have accountability, this is the participant.
I just wanted to thank you again for catching me in my lie. So
Oh.
yeah, I actually forgot some of my terminology here.
Right.
Embarrassing.
But it still works. We were treating awareness like participation, basically. But it's stepped down. Awareness is guest coherence. What?
No, awareness would be participation coherence because the guest coherence has no awareness. That's actually the difference. The guest is neutral entirely because they don't have a mapping.
I think there's 2 sides to this.
That's the assumption.
But
There's always an implicit mapping.
no. So what I meant is what the guest is working on, you could say, is to have an awareness.
The reason there's a difference between guest and participation to begin with is that the participant sees something there that's good, hence wanting to participate in it, but not really grasping the whole totality of it. They just see bits and pieces of it, right?
Yes.
So, so that's the awareness part. You're aware something is there, but don't know what it is.
Right. Now,
So that's why participation is different than being a guest. A guest could quote unquote participate, but they wouldn't even know that, right? They wouldn't know that that this is a part of something to begin with.
now, I'd like to
Like no holistic picture at all.
I get that. I'd like to kind of see this as like a kind of at each coherence
Mm-hmm.
there is what you have and what you're working on, kind of.
Yes.
I'd like to see it that way. So a guest has nothing, but
And
they're
is
working
working
on awareness.
Towards awareness, yes.
So a participant has awareness, but they're working on accountability.
No. Well, yes.
Because that's
Yes, but membership does not come until insight.
I didn't talk about membership yet at all.
Okay, so yes, you're right. So yes, as soon as you have that jump into participation, you're working on accountability. Yes,
Mhm.
and that accountability develops into a discipline.
That's the way I like to see it.
Yeah, no,
it's
no,
like
no,
what you're working on,
I
but
had it-
and what you have.
Look, I had it correct the first time. I just messed it up the second time. This time around, right? So the first, yeah. So I am yes, this is how it's supposed to be. Awareness moves into accountability of that awareness, since you're aware, which
Uh-huh.
transforms itself into an entire discipline due to that awareness.
The only
and,
time you
and
have
that accountability.
the only time you really have that like you could see you got accountability locked down is through membership. Like once you are
when awareness, discipline, awareness, accountability, and discipline are one and the same, that is insight.
I'm
That
not even there yet.
And that insight is membership.
Now I think you're breaking it down too much. At each step we have the 4. I get that. I don't think we even got into that yet.
We did before, but not this time. In our book development meetings, we did get into that.
Right.
So this is like reiterating that, but more granularly. So how do you get to the first step of awareness? That's that through implicit to explicit spectrum. The second time is also from implicit to explicit, except that the language isn't moving now from being participant to a member, and so that point about the unification of awareness, discipline, and accountability become an insight. Oh, sorry. The guest doesn't see anything there. The participant sees something there. The member sees that's the only thing that's there.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing, one amongst many, only. It's a consolidation scenario. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so there's a what you have and what you're working on type of thing going on at each layer of degree of coherence.
Mm-hmm.
So a member has accountability. They're working on their discipline. Like, not. I mean, you can't obviously
No.
make.
This
like-
is this is weird. This is the insight of becoming a member is also the awareness of mastery. So membership is the awareness that this is the model is the only thing. Whereas participation is like the model. Some things about the model is good, but the model is not the only thing. I like participating in bits and pieces of it.
Mm-hmm.
the membership insight that occurs past through the unification of
But you
awareness.
could call that accountability. That's
Right,
like
right.
like the body is transformed. Like
So I'm
this
saying-
person is now accountable.
So I'm saying
to the guild.
when awareness is isomorphic to accountability and isomorphic to the discipline, you have insight. Consolidates all back into one. And that insight is that you're a member of the of the guild, and that the guild is really the only thing that's there. That's what makes you a member. But that insight also opens up the awareness of mastery. The awareness of mastery isn't that if I can do it, somebody else can do it. Anybody can do it. It can be taught back that because we're all part of the same coherence spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
That's the awareness bit. Then you become accountable to that and disciplined by that. And then when that unifies, that becomes a jump to mastery. So you don't have domains of progress mapped to distinct degrees of coherence. Is that each jump in coherence involves all of the domains of progress repeating themselves on this
That's
layer,
where it gets
on
weird.
that
I
layer,
see.
then on that layer. So it's a recycled situation.
Can't really do one-to-one.
Yeah, it's an iteration. There is a relationship of awareness and discipline within each
Like,
about the others, but it's not like one-to-one.
I think that to present it as like a one-to-one thing might be how you would present for a participant to understand without the nuance.
Yeah, but this is if this is a
Because you're
book
saying
for the member,
equivalencies, yeah.
but if this is a book for the member, I'd like to keep that picture a bit more nuanced.
Right, okay. So...
Because the member can handle this.
So in short, at each degree of coherence, we're having a new run through of the domains of progress.
Correct.
Through that coherence.
Correct. And the way to look at those run-throughs is that you got nothing, you got many things, and you've got one thing. And then from there to mastery is to how to consolidate the many things into the one thing. That's the mastery part. And the grand mastery is to express that in several angles of ingress.
Mm-hmm.
As long more than one, basically. So here's that run through of domains of progress again. The awareness of the angles of ingress and what they detail, the accountability to those angles of ingress, right? And the discipline to navigate these angles of ingress. The unification of that is the insight.
Mm-mm-mm. Sweet insight.
So it's a pretty clear progression as far as it's mapped out if for your check marks, for your test scores, if you will, which becomes relevant for trying to fill these offices, the corporate and the state offices.
What?
The domains of coherence.
No, I mean like what explicitly laying it out or what? I didn't get what you said was important for those offices.
So to the state offices specifically, the state offices are divided as to what members are do, what masters do, and what grandmasters do, right? So
we didn't even get into that organization. Those are the spreadsheets.
So this is the institutional organization.
The spreadsheets of doom.
Yeah. The basic premise of the institution is to take the coherence model and to articulate how would a collective, the full collective, the guild, would operate regardless of how it's subdivided inside at any given time. So for that we have just to like give a brief rundown. The member sits at the very top. the member is the demand supplier, and it is the master's responsibility to navigate the demands and create the meta schedule.
Now, did we get into that stuff deep enough, or if at all, yet?
So to discuss the meta schedule in more detail, we have to bring agile economics into this, and that's talking about how demand is moved from a to-do list to a review list to a complete list. You know what I mean? Like moving shit along the progression line, and at the same time, each time something is progressing, it affects what can be and needs to be done next. So the meta schedule is kind of like a bit of agile programming philosophy, a bit of economic philosophy, a bit of this and that and that. So if we want to get into like really into any of that, we got to step through those details.
Yeah. So I'm thinking this, like the institute and the corporation, this demand and supply stuff, these two sides of the coin, if you will, they seem like they will come up in no matter what endeavor you're doing. No matter what community, no matter where you are, there's always going to be the institute, which is sitting there kind of waiting for accumulating demand, like consolidating demand.
The institute is kind of like an overlay over your environment. So like you have your raw environment, and then you have your representation of said environment. The institute is essentially tasked with that representation. They did the whole picture, if you will.
Right, of the structures of what's going on.
Right, and to make things,
and that's how it knows what demand is.
To make things less and more complicated, you don't have a situation where there's only one institute. You have a multiplicity of institutions intermingling together. So in one sense they're one, in another sense it's a bunch of things working together at the same time with overlapping. It's like so if you have three institutions, one of them could be two of the institutions, and then the other two could be the separate institutions that make up the one. Right, so in this case you have like a situation of three institutions, but all the institution at the same time.
Well, doesn't every single guild, every single hold-on need to be part of the structure? Like, isn't the institution kind
part
of
and apart? That game is played moment by moment. One moment you're part, another moment apart, another moment part, another moment apart.
But I mean, you can't not have the institution.
Well, you can't have a top-down rule saying you belong to this institution, right? Like these mappings, who belongs to where and how, those are not set in stone ever. Those are moment by moment, agile, economic activity. So moment to moment, and moments can be days, can be weeks, could be months, could be years. Right, like the moment is stretched. It's not a specific time set.
I get that.
From moment to moment, the landscape has to accommodate the underlying environment. So if the institution is acting as a representation of this environment, and that environment shifts through the activities of said institution, that shift needs to reflect in the shape of the institution as well. Right. We're not talking about rival companies or rival entities. We're talking about a cooperative space, right? Like, so we're not. So when we're talking about the merging and the dissolution of the institution itself, so it can exist in pockets.
I feel like we need to have an example. Like, we need to lay some things out, because who's responsible for starting up this institution? Is it
It's an emergent property.
Let's say one person, I want to start up a proximity guild. Where is the institution? Is it there already?
You're thinking about it too self-contained in this sense. The institution
I want to start a community garden.
The institution is the thing that collects demands. So it's about the environment itself. What are the demands of the environment? That sets up what the institution is responsible for. That sets up what corporations are there.
Yeah, but every guild is part of an environment.
The trick is to not to hold on to the idea that once an entity exists, it has this need to stay there,
Mm-hmm.
right? There is no problem with things dying off. That's not part of the picture that we're trying to set up. The idea that death is bad,
So like,
and by death
hold
I
on.
don't talk about. I'm not talking about people. I'm talking
Like
about
this is really, it's really easy to theorize, and I guess, like for most it's maybe not, but how, like, how does it actually work? We need a scenario to
You
lay
need to-
out. We need to
you
do
need to
like
eat.
an example scenario.
You need to eat. You meet a certain number of people who also need to eat.
Why isn't one enough?
Sure, one is enough.
Okay, so now the institute spins up
You-
out
they-
of
they-
nowhere.
an institute of one.
Hmm.
You become your own corporation for supplying the need the food.
Unless you're an infant.
Sure, that's an infant is not exactly capable of doing anything with awareness. So I don't think it's the right. I don't think it's the right stage
Yeah,
at which
fine.
the model is
Uh-huh.
properly discussed.
Yeah. So, but I get it. Like the institution has to emerge as demand comes up. So,
And because
Um,
and just because this institution emerged does not mean this institution cannot.
now corporations are also rising ephemerally,
Mhm.
coming and going, and they are ideally arising in
Well,
direct response to demand
what
that's been
supplies the-
collected by the institution.
So what supplies the institution is a corporation.
Yeah. But I mean, the community garden, for example, would never come to be without an institute, as a corporation, basically, without an institution first off saying, hey, we
So
want
the-
some fresh local herbs
So
and
the
stuff. So
the institution in this case is we are the community garden. The people who are gardening the garden. That's the institution. That's the first layer that you're arriving there. To
not
to,
yet.
to function as the institution, it also is the corporation supplying that function.
Yeah.
So the demand was for the institution, and it got supplied immediately. So the
Right,
next
but let's
job
slow down.
of this,
We gotta slow down.
So the next job of this, sorry,
We have to lay this scenario out. It has to be a scenario. So a bunch of people are like, we don't have fresh herbs. It's not on the market. We want fresh local stuff, right? So that the institution comes up as a corporation
we need
between these people. So the institution has arisen.
mhm.
That
And the
in
corporation.
the form of a corporation, which
Yes.
because the institution can't exist non-corporeally,
Mhm.
right? So it comes up as a corporation. Now there isn't a garden yet. There isn't a garden corporation yet. It's
Right.
just the demand. So the
Demand.
demand is now there with the institution.
So the institution is now has to supply this for this. It needs to and another corporation emerges out of that, potentially from the same people, to
Right.
supply the garden space, to supply this, to supply that, to supply the other, all the material that are necessary for the garden
Mhm.
to exist. So now you have the institution overarching the garden.
Right. So in this
with
way,
a bunch of corporations doing supplying it from the inside out.
so demand has preceded supply, which
And
is
so
good.
we don't have a distinction between people. We don't have distinctions between actual corporations, and we don't have distinctions between actual the institute as a group from the outside. The outside doesn't see corporations or institutions or people. They just see somebody bought a plot of land and moved some materials around to make it a garden.
Mhm.
Right? That's the trades guild's job to paint that picture. And yeah, so that's how the emergence of it works. There is no paper trail to this. If you noticed, the idea is not. There can be,
Mhm.
There can be for if it's something that's like I don't know years in making. Obviously,
Yeah.
all of these elements
You need
could
media.
be tracked.
And not only could be, but
Should be.
I would say should be in
Well,
almost
to keep it that long, yeah.
in almost every case, even if it's just yourself.
Well, it's an unnatural length of time, and so you need an unnatural means to extend, to
Right.
extend
the,
it.
The sooner things can just happen, the less you need media externalized to jog memory and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Makes sense.
That's kind of the idea.
Mhm.
And interestingly enough, this kind of a setup favors more short-term thinking rather than long-term, because long-term is that much harder to actually foresee.
Mm.
So it kind of plays into the corporate short-term gain
and yet,
speak,
yet
but
I
at
don't
the same
think
time
that's
it's not
really
about
true.
it, because needs are always immediate.
Well, but also foresight is a thing.
Right, but if the foresight is set about onto immediate needs perpetually, it's basically repetitive.
Right. Well, I mean, like
You
look
don't
at
need to remember it even.
look at storing food for winter. Obviously, like that's a long that's a medium term project, right?
It's a medium-term project, but at the same time, it's just the activity you do right now, as a matter of fact. So, like, if it's incorporated into your immediate need, it doesn't feel like a long-term setup.
Hmm. Anyways, this is counter to the point that I kind of want to try to make, in that there's another dimension to this. The more people you have, even if it's an immediate thing, the more you need media to communicate.
It's the same. It's the same problem that you have with stretching out time.
Mm-hmm.
If you stretch out time, you need more media. If you stretch out space, you need more media.
Mm-hmm.
But those are
Right.
elements of chaos here. We're stretching things out. We are doing a decay phenomena.
Right.
So there's a issue with that. It's a decay. So you can only go so far, and then there's no media that can accommodate it. We're at the point of where media cannot accommodate.
Right.
So we need to be. Our groups need to be more practical, if you will. Our groupings
Mm-hmm.
needs more.
Yeah,
smaller.
I get that. The whole structure. It's not like we're just.
We don't need to disassociate from people. We just need better logistics.
Mhm. I'm thinking like bite-sized economics.
Yeah, exactly. You can't chew more than you can bite. So, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
Space travel?
I guess it's important.
You do that, and maybe monologue. I'll be right back.
Yeah. And maybe we might just take a break, or, as Zhenya suggests, le monologue. So yeah, my thoughts with this, where I wanted to try and go with the whole media thing, is I believe that we're going to need good media tech, and even primitive media tech. Like, I think that, for example, using index cards is not so much different from speaking out ideas. Like, I don't really see a huge difference, aside from like the permanence. And so a usefulness in organizing with multiple people, when you have that the ability to permanently record things, and when it's recorded in what we'd call isomorphic way, then the media can more directly map to the reality, if you will. And I don't know if we're going to get into that today, but I do hope so. There is a lot with what we have been sometimes called the spreadsheets of organization, guild organization. it's a lot of detail that I don't know how really critical it is. Yeah, just monologuing about media and its importance, and that what we're going to talk about today, maybe the spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff of organization, that gets really detailed and nuanced, and I don't know that even if the book needs to necessarily go deep into that, like all those charts and like the members
It's also
supplies this and that.
incomplete because we tried to go for product at one point and failed miserably with trying to figure out what we were trying
Right.
to actually do.
It was a sprint.
Yeah. That said, it doesn't mean it was a bad idea. It was just like we never.
There was a lot of just testing out. Like we were just testing how things kind of look and work.
We just kind of like we overshot it at that point and tried to bring it back, and then it just didn't work out. So we have some works cut out for us in terms of well, media production is really what it's referring to, and just like you were saying, and interestingly enough, the first thing we did is talk on this channel, and the second thing we're doing is we're creating a book, which is a broadcast. So
Right.
it still follows it still follows the arc of modes of operation that we were attempting to express. It's just holy shit, this is not an easy topic.
No. Do you want to know something even more difficult? Along the lines of this media technology.
They're just stacked though.
If we were to try and utilize this, what we've called in the past DEC protocol, index card protocol, to describe our organization, like what we're doing,
Yeah.
I bet you that would be a challenge that makes both of us anxious and nervous, because the reason being, I know what I want to accomplish, but I have to fit it within the archetype, which is kind of a higher up thing.
Well,
In order to reach into the card game, as we've called it too, all these different names, you have to set aside the archetype, or not forget it, but move into, okay, concrete, like this line of code, that line of code, this line of code.
Right, which is basically almost arbitrary from my perspective, because it's like, yeah, it doesn't matter what line of code it is.
Right.
That's where I said it seems tangential to me, and when I go into
Tangential.
Tangential. And then when I start discussing the actual how to put the code together, with ignoring every single line specifically, and just how to put you're like, well, that's the tangent for me. Like that's not what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, it's definitely.
Yeah.
But it's also like a great feedback observation experiment right there. Like, we need to track this right there,
Right.
because this conversation is essentially about the duality archetypes of order and chaos and how they affect consolidation and decay. And then I know that this is an esoteric topic overall, so it's kind of between me and you again, instead of more for the audience. But the excitement that I'm trying to express it is like, not only are we talking about the model, we're seeing it in action, and that's what's really excites me about it, is that it has a confirmation basis. As we're seeing its own dynamics play out in the very conversation about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild.
Order and chaos, concrete and abstract. Yeah. And
So,
always
like,
coming back to the same things.
if I may, for just un moment. So we brought these up in the past. These are index cards. I just want to quickly illustrate. So I'm going to use yellow because it's most easily visible. It's like a white almost on the screen. So what we do with this media is we map reality. That's the point of it. This is what a facilitator would use if they're helping a company to operate better. They would describe the company utilizing media and help people, like, what's your facet of the company that they're facilitating? What are your inputs and outputs? That was kind of loud. But anyways, so we can talk about our context right now. For example, Portal Mountain. If we put that in a circle, maybe that means something. Maybe that means it's a hold-on, right?
Well, it depends on the grammatical rules chosen, I guess.
So yeah, exactly. Of what do these mean? So we could kind of like, if you want, like spike into there and say the book, right, as a facet of that, or you could draw it differently. A facet of the book is like, the different chapters maybe.
Yeah, I think the point you're trying to make is that what the facilitator does is they take whatever the environment they are given,
Probably a neighbor.
the environment that they're given,
Yeah.
and create a representation
Yes,
of that environment
exactly.
in such a way that that representation can be worked with, and then once that representation has been worked through, you take that back and you try to reify it onto the company itself so
As a hyperstation.
So you took what was, you put it into a representation, you shifted the representation around, and then you're trying to put what is into the new representation. That's facilitation in a nutshell,
Right.
and that's what you're trying to describe there. Is that you're bringing you can bring a card in as that medium and do it. You can bring just words into it
Yes.
and just do that, or you can do something that's much more technophilic,
Dashboard.
databases and so on. The point I actually thought of as soon as you started talking about this is that you're presenting media as something that's after the fact, as something that we get to use after we have evolved, so to speak.
Right.
But the concept of media in itself is actually much
Yeah.
more fundamental,
No,
and
I want it to be-
and it underscores every single layer.
It has to be
in
like
the stack.
instantaneously resonant.
So this kind of medium is more abstract in its movements because it's about thoughts. But we have the same thing happening with chemistry, the same thing happening with any other layered aspect of our neurology, our biology. All of those layers use media. So this is just another additional kind of media that keeps going up the layers. I just
Right.
wanted to point out that this is not a unique manifestation. It's actually just a repetition of an underlying process.
We need to nail this down into our own like kind of grammar
Yeah.
for the book.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I think. And like, so there's nothing here. This is just well, there's Portal Mountain and there's a book. What about like if we have Portal Mountain as say a context? Let's say that's grammar for a context, and then lobby, right? Maybe that's, or like however you would draw it, and then maybe that's, this card is for that, or like, and then like I need, what I need is, this is a hole on Portal Mountain. This is a hole on, like this could be lobby as a guild. It's a proximity guild. That's you could say proximity guild. What I need to do is to switch between two different pieces of media. It could be represented by a different color if you want, or you could start like, say that's green, or you could start going like welcome,
So
protocol,
to clarify,
and you see how that's a square now.
to clarify your arc here, are you trying to demonstrate how PM could be looked at two different ways and how to consolidate that?
You mean like with the book in the lobby?
Yeah, because you said here we have PM and then book. Here we have
Yes.
PM and then lobby.
Yes.
Book is not lobby.
No, not
but,
at all.
But they're both PM.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you'll notice how I kind of tried, it's more apparent here, I tried to stack context. So this is like the tail of context, and this is my target, is lobby right now. From that lobby target, I want to iterate protocols, because this is the flip side, right? We've got the what it is.
So this media card looks absolutely nothing like this media card, because the book is now about part, chapter.
Uh-huh.
So what we're seeing here is a completely different view of what Portal Mountain is.
Right.
The point isn't to demonstrate our great ability to communicate with paper, but the point is to demonstrate that one single word, in this case Portal Mountain, spreads itself out into a completely different narrative.
Like what part of Portal Mountain?
Well, yeah. And
Yes.
So this is an obvious point.
We
usually,
need media and grammar that has the capacity to talk about it in an open way, in a holonic way, that doesn't unnecessarily constrict it down to, oh, Portal Mountain is this, Portal Mountain is that. No, that's what circling it means. It's a freaking holon. It has a bunch of
Context.
parts, and it's part of a bunch of things.
So context. Portal
Right.
Mountain in this context. Portal Mountain in that context. Portal Mountain
Right.
in the third context. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is.
Right.
The paper point isn't to glorify this medium to begin with. Is to just point out that the actual media assembly itself is part of the picture, and it doesn't matter which media is chosen. It's that it has to reflect contexts.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. So there's some kind of underlying grammar or whatever of that needs to be utilized in order to properly capture holonic structures.
And how do you
that
jump-
ain't easy.
And how do you jump from one context to another?
You have a context tail or chain, which must be identified, and then you get to your what
I
you're
have a
talking
simpler
about.
solution, which just repeats. The change from one context to another is just one other context.
How do you identify them? How do you differentiate context?
It's an emergent thing.
No, you have to.
So how to? This is skill. This is insight. This is qualitative, and you don't have formulas for it. I know it's a cop-out
And yet
answer.
we are making a grammar.
I know it's a cop-out answer. Don't get me wrong. The point being is that quantifying is not going to be a route with an end, because it's just going to blow up into infinity.
Like, yeah, I get that.
That's what I'm saying.
This isn't a machine. This isn't a machine language. You can never put this into a computer. That's what. Maybe that's.
Synthetic neural computation is where this would work properly,
Right. Yeah. That.
because that's the context switch. We have that mechanism in there. That's what allows us to switch context to begin with. This idea of mapping things to other things, isomorphisms. The only reason that this is working is because there's an isomorphism between here. That's the jump that allows us to do it. And then
What?
as soon as we accept different identities for a single thing, you can
What I
explore
mean
it
is, I
differently.
think interpretation is such a big part of it.
How things are reified, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the card
And like
diagram.
it seems anytime you feed something into a machine, it like, hey, maybe like we're seeing with like AI and Chat GPT and all that, like it is, like it seems like that shit has an understanding of space and connection with.
Well, we do have a useful distinction between machines, a spectrum, if you will. We have market and we have polymorphism.
Right.
A polymorphic machine is never the same machine twice. The market machine is the same machine every time.
Right.
And
Yeah, okay, yeah, so-
in between the two is where we find ourselves.
Right. Yeah, like the point I guess I was trying to get to, yeah, the polymorphic
mechanical
machine, the
spectrum.
polymorphic machine will always must always look into all the nuance of every single facet of its structure.
In the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because
And
not every facet is relevant
that's what I
to
meant.
every moment.
That's what I meant. The way computers are programmed these days, there is no, a question is a halt program.
Yeah. This is the same. The halting program, the halting problem, the incompleteness theorem. They're all in the same. They're all of the same makeup.
Mm-hmm. Right. So this.
That's not my words. That's, you can read papers on this if you want.
I wonder, like, how far we can take this Portal Mountain lobby scenario in expressing it using cards, for example. Different facets of it.
Lobby, conversation, guests, participants.
There's different roles, right?
There's conversations. There's participants. There's also the sort of like the
Well, there's more than conversations. We know there's broadcasts, there's workshops, and there's
no. So
you can continue. Like,
hold on. Yes.
we can iterate so many different.
So it does take in all of the modes of operation because
Yep.
it's the consolidator of them. But then it has also doorways to the academy, not the academy, to the embassy, to the bonfire, to the obelisk, to the
And what do we call those again?
to the lab.
The temperamental.
Yeah, so the lobby is not only itself self-contained funnel of all of that information. It also spreads people into those spaces, and it also.
Right. So we've got coherence and temperamental axes.
And then from those spaces, it has a function of channeling everything up to the campus, and then further into the academy.
Like,
so it's like,
yeah, I get.
It's got all of these different ways of looking at it.
So, if we're gonna, it does have a lot of all these different ways, and we can write them down.
Yeah.
Right?
I just threw out a whole bunch of shit,
Yes.
hoping to see what sticks.
So we've got modes of operation, and this would be like, this I think is how we facilitate. First off, we draw what exists, what we think exists. Now, coherence guilds. I would put coherence guilds and
Well, no, I'm-
temperament guilds.
No, you said modes of operation. That's your temperaments.
What, like
Modes of
awareness?
no.
Oh yeah.
Bonfire, conversation,
right.
obelisk, broadcast.
But no.
No. Sorry, my bad.
Well, workshop for obelisk, literature for the
Bonfire.
the lab.
So, embassy,
Bonfire, broadcast.
embassy, for
Convo.
yeah, embassy for conversation.
I got you. Okay, that's-
bonfire for broadcast, obelisk for
But it's not really like that. Well.
obelisk is workshop, and then lab is fuck.
Literature.
Yeah. Recording stuffs. That's why it's literature. You record your experiments. It's not literature in the form of fiction. It's literature in the form of record. To take off the reality and to have it represented.
I can't. It doesn't really quite work for me because I think that those are more temperament than mode of operation.
Well, mode of operations are mapped into temperaments as well.
Of course, but
that's where it came from.
Yet in every single of these places, you have conversation happening.
Well, just like with temperaments, they're holonic. So within the devotional, you have your
Right.
pragmatic, you have your academic, and you have your perceptive. It's just tailored differently. So, yeah, within every mode of operation, you also have the other modes of operation.
It's just
It is that convoluted, absolutely.
it's close. It is close. I agree that it's almost indistinguishable, but
Well, modes of operations are a holodic structure. In a broadcast, you have a conversation. In a conversation, you have a broadcast. And you have representation, which is the literature, and you have the language being used. And then
hmm.
a workshop is harder to work into
Right.
it because it
Now-
seems more explicit, but still.
But do you see how just because we started writing it down, it became like, oh, this isn't, we don't really know. Like, not that we don't know, but it's like,
I'm fairly comfortable with this. I understand that there is difficulty in like going from the nebulous, it all being tied together, and how do you present it concretely.
What I mean by we don't really know is
Oh.
not that we can't talk about it or we don't know, is that by definition it's not written down. Therefore, nobody fucking knows.
Fine.
That's
If
what I mean.
if you equate knowledge with
Yes.
with representation.
Because there's no shared map. So, like, does somebody know? Does they don't? Or what? I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of power in writing stuff down and trying to work through
Mm-hmm.
Portal Mountain structure. And I think that this is a perfect opportunity. We've been using it for years, Portal Mountain.
Well,
Not using it, but creating it.
one of the things we have to do with this representation is to go sideways from the typical logical way of representing things, because philosophically speaking, right, we're talking through a language that assumes things like the identity property, the non-exclusiveness property. So all of these assumptions that weigh in into how people put together information don't really apply to what we're putting down on these pieces of paper here. For example, this and this being the same thing, while this not being the same thing, flies in the face of A equals A, the identity property that usually is used in logic.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't apply here. You can't. This is not the thinking process that is useful for any of this information.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into like how are we going to put this down into the media, I have to ask the question: how are we going to avoid placing that media into the bounds of these assumptions,
Because
while trying
that's
to
the
explain
grammar.
other assumptions?
That's the grammar of the marks. When I put something in a circle or a curve, that means it's a holon. It must be treated differently. It's
Right.
not. It's not bound up in that kind of
No, I'm
logic.
I'm just saying that in order to like clarify what you're
Mm.
trying to say, we have to abandon things like A equals A.
Sure.
We have to abandon things like if A equals B and B equals C, then C equals A, because that's also not how we work.
Mm-hmm.
Like this isn't going to fly. It's going
Right.
to completely fly in the face of that. The transitive property, the identity property, like we don't use them in this
So,
in this
What
setup.
you're talking about right now is
Quality versus quantity, really.
like holonic model, right? How do you use that? There's like grammar, media, right? And these can all, of course, be
So-
their own things.
So grammar-wise is where you get model speak. because model speak turns in, well, any language really in which it's used on its face. It's reutilizing the same language with a different set of rules, if you will. Terms. Terms being translatable. That's one of its rules. The translatable terms are retranslatable for conversational purposes. That's another one of its rules. Right? In the Hellenic model, the conversation is with yourself. Like all of these different elements that don't apply to regular language.
Right. And so what I would like to identify in this grammar is, like, for example, you're just saying almost rules there, like you're conversing with yourself. So
Exclusively.
um,
Like these are hard
so
rules.
Hellenic model, like, I don't know, it just seems like self, but then there's protocol, right? Like self-talk protocol.
Mm-hmm.
All conversation is with self, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want a grammar like this that's able to map it out, and I think this is close, maybe. I don't know.
It depends on how you read the card, sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the same with the diagrams and the tables.
But I need, so this is my end game for the book, is to be able to present something like this that can be useful for a facilitator to facilitate the guild.
The point of it being a conversation for oneself is a useful moniker. Like it's concrete. Like, you know how you have that inner voice, right?
It said yes.
So so one of the presented goals of the book would
It should
be,
have said no, though. That would have been a good joke.
but you know what I mean? Like it's like you're trying to get if you're trying to get a facilitation, the first part of facilitation is like to basically say the things like, you use this to talk to yourself. You use this as a media of representation, and you know yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Mm-hmm.
The guild is the way to look at Portal Mountain as a collection of actual people, for example. Again, Portal Mountain, Portal Mountain, Portal Mountain, Portal Mountain. Different words used, different, not different things are being presented, but a different context in which it is being presented, and all of a sudden it's a completely different discussion. The grouping of people is the agile economics conversation. The book conversation is the arc. The PM
Right.
conversation is stepping through coherence.
So here's the challenge, I think, on top of what I just said about this type of facilitation tech, is we should use this tech to describe everything at, say, the end of the book.
Yes.
Like, here's a starter deck for what the guild is.
Well, if the arc is that it should be your inner monologue, then your outer monologue to the outer world should reflect that. And if everybody's reflecting the same damn thing, ish, in different ways, again, look at what we're saying about something being the same. This is the same as that, this is the same as that, is the same as that. So what we're saying is that no, you don't have to normalize people. It's just that the acknowledgement that the conversation will always be about the same thing, regardless of the context, is where the unification is happening. So the people are not normalized, but the conversation is. Hold off.
Okay. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we shall be right back. You
So,
down.
let me finish soon.
You down. Yeah, so this is, to me, this is kind of, this facilitation media tech is like kind of like a holy grail for me. I've been after it for like 6+ years, like just this.
Well, you're trying to see how to utilize the media that we have and consolidate it with the medium of nature to make how do we
Mm-hmm.
how do we take what we see in the model as far as medium goes in presenting the model already and to translate that into another representation on current medium, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the idea, right? Like to take the model and write it down.
To me, the biggest constraint is that,
So the model's been writing itself down for so long. Now we're trying to do it from a primitive language perspective.
mm-hmm. And every circle here is not limited to what's written on the card.
Of course.
Like, that's kind of the problem, that there is no, you can't say whatever is written, that is the structure, that is one context, that's a representation of
Yeah.
one context.
I mean, already we have this is this is this is this. I mean, what? Right? Like the corners of each card are one thing, and yet everything they present outwards is totally not the same thing. We made
Sure,
that,
yeah,
we
yeah.
made that point earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, it is all very, very close. Yeah,
Well,
but
the point was is that identity rules will fly out the window. Transitivity rules fly out the window. We're not using your standard, what you call logic system to navigate any of this, which would
Right.
be quantifiable. This is a qualified.
that's the big problem.
Mm-hmm.
Is that most things where you write it down, it becomes in stone, so to speak, and it becomes a structure which is mechanically executed. This is not that.
Yeah.
This can never be that.
Usually the way I tackle this is to say that this is a representation, a symbolic variation of what's being represented. The trick is to understand that when you start to deal with symbols, they have their own rules, and those rules are not the same as the rules of the things that they're representing. Symbolic rules are not
Right.
the
Of course.
same. So the problem with reification is that when the symbol system runs away, and it doesn't map anything back to what gave the symbols out in the first place.
This is the point of this is that it's never supposed to be allowed to run away if you're observing it properly, because every circle here is everything.
Well,
It's not a specific
not supposed to
thing.
let it run away is one way of saying it, but the way the functional element of that is not in the knowledge of that, but rather in realization of it being a representation and not the represented
Not the thing itself. Yeah, correct.
So you can't use the knowledge
So
to just
if we go
work
by
for
that model axiom, then we can never pigeonhole a thing into being its thing and download over it
Exactly.
without feedback.
You can always extract symbolism out of something, but you can never necessarily
Force it back.
force it back down.
As if that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And this is a lesson humanity apparently needs to learn right now. And
Well, as I've been saying,
not very
the
good at
problem
it.
is with the upload, but at the same time, it's also with the upload problem causes a download problem at the same time. Because if you're working with garbage, what are you going to download onto the rest of the system?
Yeah.
Garbage. I know. I mean, I know it sounds very simplified, but if all your thoughts are crap, what are all your actions? Right? Like, how do they reify
Well,
that down?
especially the meta thoughts of how do you navigate reality, which it seems like that's been sealed off. through education.
You know what?
Quote unquote, through lowercase education.
This is why mimicry is important. Synchronicity isn't established through, reification from bottom up. I don't understand why you're talking English to me, because I grew up knowing English outside of besides myself. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't grow up knowing a language to communicate with you to begin with, right? That was embedded into me through society.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is what mimicry is about. You can't learn a language by it being embedded in you through your physiology, your own stacking.
Sorry, I don't know what this means. Yeah, okay. That's more clear.
Right? Like, you have to learn it from other people. That's mimicry. You copy and copy and copy and copy and copy,
Just
and
associations.
all of these associations internally get internalized into some kind of machinery that responds to the world. Right? If this mimicry is broken, then the machinery that comes out of it is broken or dysmorphic, and so its push down reification is broken. So you have a twofold problem with broken upload, in that a broken stack, if you will not necessarily resonate properly with the symbol, with the representation that is being sent across the medium.
Well, a broken stack, by broken, usually I think we mean at some point the upload channel has lost its touch with
reality.
What's below, with reality.
Right. So we're talking about people who would drink bleach as a means of escaping COVID.
Because they love Trump so much.
Well, that's the second.
That's the
That's the
unsaid
second part.
of it.
That's how it works out. So you need a broken system on the one end, and you need a broken message on the other end, and together, thinking it's an isomorphic message destroys the stack.
Uh-huh.
So this is the worst case scenario, obviously.
Weird.
So
Right. So what were we saying? So there's two-part problem.
yeah, I used to.
The upload's already broken, and then
The upload is pre-broken to begin with, because what you send downstream does not have to reflect anything in the downstream to begin with, and so if the other stack has no resonance with that, it can't necessarily understand the message.
So proper upload channel somehow has to be built into what's below already. That way, the downloads coming from above have somewhere to process to the side channel, as we've called it in the past, to speak back to the upper layers of society or whatever.
But the trick to getting it to the below part is to have a proper sequence, proper mimicry, or mimicking something that already does it. Like a flame passed on to another flame, passed on to another flame, passed on to another flame. It has to sort of keep up. You know,
Right.
the torch needs to be passed. Is the metaphor being?
Well, this is how humans learn from from birth.
That's all I am
is-
talking
is
about.
copying. Because you can't really know the higher until all you can sense is synchronicity. Because it's an unspoken order. It's like, wow, this happened and this happened at the same time. So your mind kind of meshes, like neurons that fire together, wire together idea, right? You see two things which
We don't know the exact mechanism, but yeah.
which seem unrelated, but they happen yet at the same time, or in some contexts we're joined together in a synchronous moment.
Mhm.
And that's what's giving us, okay, maybe I'm doing it right, because that's fucking weird. Like, that never happens.
Well, it's a property of neural networks themselves. You just throw information at it, and they start to adapt to that information, and then eventually start to represent that information.
Right, but I mean, the fire together, wire together, I don't care how it happens, but like, we notice that's a noticing of synchronicity, right?
Yeah, but mimicry plays a key role in the how protocol jumps from one stack to the next. The only reason the protocols are able to do you remember the car diagram? We could pull it up if you
Sure.
want for a reference, but if you remember the car diagram, we have a situation in which the information being passed along goes to the top arc through fiat. So if I say a certain sequence of words, you have no choice but to hear that sequence of words. That's the fiat part.
And construct the ongoing meaning of it,
Right,
from
right.
our perspective.
But then there is like the bottom, from how that information actually needs to go through the bottom of the stack onto a medium and then get expressed, and then there's an expression, and then there is interpretation side to it.
Right.
Anyway,
At every layer, practically.
Yeah, long story short, in order for whatever sequence up here to make sense on the other stack on the same level
Yep.
up here, a protocol has to be common to both stacks.
That's one way of saying it. I think, like, the interpretation at that layer of that symbology is the same at an underlying layer, and you're both kind of able to resonate.
So I have to know English, you have to know English,
Mhm.
and so by speaking English words, you have no choice, fiat, to hear English words in whatever dictionary or interpretation you have on your end. So if our protocols match, if I'm vibrating this way, then on the receiving end you should be vibrating the exact same way if we're completely isomorphic.
Right.
Nobody says everything is perfect in this setup, by the way. This is like always idealized
And it never- yeah, it never is.
to explain the concept, but not to present a reality. It's a lot like in quantum mechanics, where you have the idealized paths of the particles, but you never actually know the real outcome, because there's more particles than are being represented to begin with.
That was really weird. I just noticed my laptop was pushed against the microphone.
Oh.
So even typing you might be able to hear it.
Our apologies.
And also, when you moved this pencil, it like went red.
Oh wow.
So
Our apologies.
yeah, I don't know how long that was. Hopefully nothing too weird. But I only just started touching the laptop. So, however, there may be a drone like of the fan coming through.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Hopefully that didn't
Screw
mess
it up too much. Yeah.
Didn't mess y'all up there. Just making some adjustments here, and we're gonna pull up this car diagram for fun.
Yeah. So my point with the diagram.
Once we get there,
Wait.
here we go.
Yeah. So the point of mentioning this diagram is that you have this thing called protocol there, second layer down. So for any communication to really work, right? The signal sent out and the signal interpreted has to say, metaphorically speaking, oscillate in the same way. Right? The message gets passed along. That's why I call it resonance. It's like when you hit a string and another string starts to vibrate.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I use the oscillation metaphor. If protocols are disconnected from each other, you send that signal, but either the protocol on the interpreting side has either getting noise or the wrong message, right? Depending on how closely the protocols mirror each other. The point about mimicry being important is that these protocols are mimicked.
And this is a fundamentally decay and a chaotic process. Because at that layer, your protocols are you're trying out the protocol. Nobody ever has the same protocol, even spoken in the same language.
Right.
Protocol is something that you're trying out based on, you clump it together out of fundamental chunks of the lower layers, the layer immediately below.
Imagine if these two protocols were part of the same mind and didn't match each other.
That'd be schizophrenia.
Could be.
That's what that sounds like. Shit. Homie, don't play that.
Well, you now see why I like my model so much. My model. That's not.
Yes.
It's not mine, but it's a lot of my thinking. But yeah, yeah.
We all love
It-
our
it-
model.
It
We,
could, it
we
could
all
be,
have a model,
It could
which
be
we love.
schizophrenia. It could be schizoid, depersonalization type stuff, where you just can't relate to the narratives of the world at all.
So, like, to make this super impressive, though, in my mind, my opinion, would be to continue this sort of arc of how do we express onto media, and getting into like protocols,
So
event, condition, action, that kind of stuff.
So this is a guide. This is the template by which we like. This is the constraint, right there. Does it follow this pattern? The only other thing I wanted to mention about this map, this diagram before we keep going,
We have to bring one more in.
is that arc, the arc of Fiat.
We need.
It's important as well. There is no choice in what you hear and how you hear it. That is an important element of this. It's all protocol dictated, and because it's protocol dictated, there is no.
Yeah, that's interesting.
There is no.
Not like
choice.
a choice in the moment, but there is a choice to modify your underlying protocols, right?
Yeah, the choice is after the fact. But
Right.
What would you hear?
In the moment, it's a sum total of the stack rising into resonance with that message.
If you thought a thought, did you have a choice in thinking it?
No.
That's the point
And if
I'm
you
making.
get a
And if you-
signal,
if you heard a word-
if your phone vibrates, do you have a choice but to realize that you've got a signal that you need to respond to? No, you just know that right away.
Yeah, that's what fiat means. Information is going at you. You're not. You're on a field of vibrations, and the vibration
And
arrives.
this is how society can be so complex. Well, with nobody in the moment really thinking about it so
Yeah.
much, and yet this whole world turns.
Fiat is a driver.
Trillions and trillions of dollars exchanged hands every day.
So fiat is what's responsible for your. If you're on autopilot, then fiat has the upper hand, in that it goes from one resonance wave to the next, to the next, to the next, and it's all pre-programmed through
Mhm.
fiat.
Now, this is making me think that a facilitator, a guild facilitator, one of the first things they would do is kind of lay out this holonic structure and this kind of like idea of resonance wakes and this car diagram stuff. Appreciate.
I've learned.
As like a introduction, like even the first 5 minutes,
Mhm.
5-10 minutes. Let's say you got an hour with 100 people too, and they're in a company, they're doing their own thing. You don't know what it is. You got an hour with them, okay? And it's like, you know, I want there to be something where it's like, okay, people are trained how to do this. You know, you walk into something not blind, like you've been able to, you know, what the company does. You can research, you can talk to their managers and like, hey, this is what our goals are. But in that moment, I want to be able to like set up 5 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes of that hour, just explaining this is what we are doing. We have a medium and we're using it, we're utilizing it to describe what we do. And then we're going to talk about how to transform that. But first we need the image of what we do. Then we can talk about how we would like it to change. So this is a way.
And the image of what we do is that we have a medium no matter what, which is what this picture is saying, and why I pointed it out to you.
Right.
And that we're starting off from the point of view is that it's already on a medium, and what we're trying to facilitate is a medium representative of that medium
Right.
and how that interacts. So the medium
Right.
that we initially speak about is kind of vague and nebulous as always.
And it's sort of pointing to the target company itself, like the environment itself,
But what
which we are representing.
But what's going to go on the medium is, say, things like this car diagram representing the medium, right? So the nebulousness of the initial medium is removed by the representations of it in the concrete medium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Correct.
I
correct.
feel helpful now instead of over talking.
That seems pretty deep, but that would be like the first minute or two, maybe.
Yeah.
Like start with the archetype and then kind of span out a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my ideal. Like the book, I want it to end there, where someone can read this book, be excited about the guild, and like facilitate a company to like change the way they do something, or
Company, or maybe something more close to home, because I feel
anything.
I feel if
a
you
community garden,
I f-
any group.
Yeah.
I know that companies
So-
are obviously profit motive driven.
Yeah,
so their managers are not going to be open to change, which is just
Yeah,
let's open the company
to the bottom line.
Let's basically we just
Yeah.
want to help humanity.
The
now.
idea, the point, the fear I have with that approach to companies
I get it. I
specifically
get it.
is that if you try to hurt the bottom line, you're out.
This is a layer removed from what we normally do and talk about, which is the guild itself.
So-
I'm foreseeing this as a book, a product out in the market. It needs to be applicable to some segments with power. In other words, to get into the market.
Let's just say your version of the company is the self-incorporated individual, potentially working with other self-incorporated individuals.
Right.
So, the point being there,
Honestly, this is
every
company,
a coalition,
every
of
company
these,
should love that.
a coalition of self-incorporated individuals constitutes
See,
the
this
institute.
This is a very fine line.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Because
Though?
I think we're on the same page. When you empower the individual to communicate through this facilitation media, the whole company benefits. This is bootstrapping feedback, proper upload. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And we have to talk about transition, Jenya.
So you're talking about the
Transition.
corporation as we envision it for the guild, but not the corporation as it exists in the system today. Because the
Both.
company, when you say company,
I'm
you're
saying
envisioning a
company-
group of people, and a group of people that is unified through their proximity guild rather than through their affiliation with a signed-on entity on a piece of paper.
Well, we can define. We
Can
should
be both.
What
but-
I know company sounds so much nicer, but corporation is linked to me with institution, and that's a guild. Those are guild terms.
I use the terms
and
interchangeably.
when I've said company, we shouldn't though. But company, can that be the
Most companies are incorporated, as far as I know. So to me, when you say company, it's already on the systemic side.
yes? That's what I'd like to designate with that.
Groupings. Maybe we can find another way of saying it. Like, there's community. There is we have guild. But guild is the nebulous one. I don't want to use communes, but they would actually be relevant.
That's a bad word.
Very bad. That's why I said I don't want to use it.
Don't do that.
The difference being is that a group of people is either grouped for this purpose or a different purpose.
Oh.
Are they grouped for an activity? Are they grouped for living quarters? Are they grouped by? That's
Right.
all I'm saying there. I'm not
Yeah,
talking.
yeah.
I'm not talking about like.
Pretty crowded on the
set-
stream today.
I'm not talking about a setup of a commune or anything to that effect. Idealized.
Yeah, and-
Idealized thinking all throughout.
I just want to clarify the point. The reason I bring up company and start talking about like for profit. I'm talking for profit.
Mhm.
The existing one is the transition. We're talking about a spectrum, a dichotomous spectrum of market versus guild, sort of, not versus, but I want to see it as a spectrum, one from the other, and a transition, and things can swing one way or another. I don't want to exclude or say that we have to destroy one thing. More than that, we never can. They will always, there will always be both sides to the coin, right? Trade guild navigating.
Yeah, the transition point that you're why I wrote it down. The transition point that you're referring to is literally its sole preoccupation. That's the constraint under which everything is placed.
So I don't know. Maybe think of me as
So to from the guild's perspective, there is no transition. There is a membrane.
right.
From the system's perspective, the guild is hiding in plain sight and isn't even there. So it's not even a trend. Yes, there is like this kind of like a smooth
you're
resonance thing going, but from one perspective, nothing is there. From
You're
the other
right.
perspective, there's a hard line.
But qualitatively, the system, it can't be represented in memory. In other words, externalized memory or anything.
So the way I picture it, just to finish off a thought, the way I picture it is that the trade guild is like hyper accounting sensitive entity onto itself, and what it's tasked with doing is trying to navigate the fine line of ownership of what belongs to who from the systemic point of view, in which
Sorry if you got cut off there too.
in which it
Notice that.
removes the inquiry from the system as to what's going on. So
Right.
So all legal accounting.
Protective sort of.
So all legal accounting to just make sure that the
Membrane.
actual supplies are moved accounting-wise to the proper spaces within the internal
Yeah, it's great.
overarching trade guild, which is composed of real corporate spaces out there with quote-unquote true believers. That's the tall order part.
What space? Wait. True believers. So corporations.
So you have real corporations out in the world doing a whole bunch of accounting so that material moves within the ecosystem of the guild.
The thing that strikes me as so
Not
weird
not easy.
is that from it's not weird, but and we're just identifying structures. We're not inventing this. We're not holding the flag to charge.
One last point.
But
One last point before I forget.
it's all in a way secret.
And I'm sorry. I didn't mean.
That's my point. It's weird that it's kind of secret.
I did not mean to cut you off there. Shit.
You lost it. You got to write it down. That's why we shouldn't share a pencil here. You have this one. But yeah, from the system's perspective, you only understand the guild qualitatively. You only sense it qualitatively. That
So it doesn't exist.
That the guild is happening.
So from the system's perspective,
And
it should not
that
exist.
not that it's a secret, but that it effectively acts as a secret.
I remember
which
my
is-
point. I remember
which
my
is
point.
weird.
So it would sound like I'm a tall order because we're looking at the things being masked from the system and moved around. But one thing to remember isn't that
It's not masked. It's just a plateau. It's just integrating with the plateau. Plain and simple.
That's the masking
There's
part.
no mask. There's no secret.
Well, yes. Sorry, it's a different way of looking at it.
Right,
But
but we
I'm-
don't need to. We don't need that. Carry on. Sorry, I never do this to you. You do it to me all
No,
the time.
I know. It's fair.
And I don't go.
It's fair game. It's fair game. Fair
Okay,
game.
just do it.
I'm a little bit more intense on that front for sure. The thing to remember about
Is that how it goes?
the thing to remember about this division.
Yes,
What are you doing?
I'm listening.
Distracting me, man.
Keep doing it.
So, in a way, it would seem like it would be like laundering items from the system by hiding it behind the trade guild. But the idea to really really nail it down to being feasible and not just a pie in the sky kind of idea, is that real demands, are much less straining on the system than it would have you believe, because
Sure, yeah.
demands begin with feeding, sleeping, um,
Right.
living.
Even
They're very basic.
the bare
They're bare minimum
minimums
stuff.
are
It's the bare minimum
not a
stuff.
lot.
So we're not talking about like grandiose scheme of moving
No.
riches
We're talking like
about
in
within the
today's
system
in
and
today's
hiding it.
terms, literally like
What we're
say
hiding
$20
is
billion. That's like half of a military campaign. We could do Maslow's hierarchy, the bottom for everyone in the world. Period. Like as far as the basic needs, done, fucking done deal.
so basically it's the removing of the hassle of having to deal with your living space and not being able to afford it.
Not accounting for war and conflict and all this kind of. Obviously,
No,
everything's a mess
idealized
of shit. But
we're in an idealized space right now.
if everyone agreed to cooperate, it wouldn't take more than $20 billion to do everything for the.
In the ideal setup, if you have this shelter built around, financially speaking, with a trade guild doing its job of balancing everything out on the balance sheets.
Mhm.
No, the system isn't questioning who owns these apartments in which people who don't pay anything perhaps live. That's how it's hiding in plain sight. To the system, everybody's paying. The
Right.
bills are paid.
I got you.
From the other perspective, the people who are actually utilizing the space are not the ones that are directly having to do that, because they're not there for that. They're there to accomplish other tasks, right? And
Right.
On and on and on. It
Instead
sort
of that,
distributes.
this is kind of like anti-atomization.
Right, right. And so you have this
That
from the
every one person should have to pay every single bill and take the whole load onto themselves by doing the 9 to 5.
And
If they're
so-
lucky enough to live in a place in the world that gives you even that.
And so, with the trade guild taking care of all of the accounting between the existent corporations that are involved in guild dynamics, existence to the system, that are involved in guild dynamics, they don't look like anything. Ownership is taken care of, bills are paid. Yeah. And the efficiency heuristic of, say, the
Sorry. You know your comment about the model teaching us to speak to ourselves?
yeah.
Well, Skew says, that sounds very solipsistic of you.
True. It
Be in
is.
your own world reality.
Yes, if there was no window for isomorphism, which was the point.
Right.
Because consolidating on model speak as being the inner monologue gives a window for isomorphism for others who are model speaking.
Right.
And with that, the seemingly solipsistic element is also objective. So it's
Right.
it's like a marriage of the two.
Interesting. But yeah, in a way, learning about yourself and your own inner structure and organization of thoughts and cognition and all that, we inherently learn about others because of the social in the fact that we're essentially clones of each other. Right?
And so
Like DNA wise.
And so while there is the characteristic solipsism in which you're just like inward bound, there's a way to utilize it to not be inner bound, right? That's like the emergence out of the spectrum of stupidity. It's the emergence out of they don't go away, right? Like karma doesn't go away, much like Buddha said. There's a residual, so to speak, elements of karma to burn up after waking up, so to speak. This is the same thing. This is like, yeah, you don't escape solipsism. You don't escape objectivism.
I'm reminded
because
that
those are the representational elements.
I'm reminded, I guess, that you have to have a model like a meta model, which is accurate, which can help you pull apart the moments themselves.
Hmm. So to really directly answer that,
So that's what you have to be self-obsessed with, is that type of self-model.
I'd like to answer this criticism head on, though. Solipsism is actually not only taking that representation, but also believing that representation to be real. So yeah, model speak is like in the solipsistic sort of space.
He's obviously joking, but
I know, but it was a great comment. I loved it, because there is a difference, and the difference, as I've tried to always paint it, was that the spectrum of stupidity, that space between objectivism and solipsism, going completely external, going completely internal, it's only really relevant if it's taken to be real. So the other factor that
well, this is the psychosis
plays into
part.
Psychosis.
That's what enables this.
I was going to
thing
talk
happen.
about superstition. Superstition is to take representation for the real, and thus land yourself into said psychosis and neurosis, cycling through it.
Right. Well, we would say the psychosis is what enables that as well.
Yeah. This is the whole picture. So you need superstition on top of solipsism to degenerate the psychosis and to be actually embedded into the spectrum. To like get it's the same metaphor of like getting stuck, latching on.
Such a great conversation. The spectrum of stupidity, psychosis, neurosis, the fine differentiation, like psychosis being more the reification of things, neurosis being like the affect-led, conceited attachments to that reality which is real. It's kind of like a double, like a two-punch combo.
Really, if you were to talk about all of these things from the perspective of presence and then immersion, then psychosis, neurosis, solipsism.
And again, which one? Because I forget. I know we kind of
Presence is in
lined
the
those
moment.
up.
Presence is in the moment. Immersion into the dream.
Right. I got that. That's logical. But
neurosis is in the moment. Psychosis is latching onto the dream.
That's what I was wondering.
So those are the distinguishing.
So I didn't go back and look at it, but I was thinking I forgot which.
Yeah. So those are the two counterparts.
Psychosis, the dream, because that is what is reality. What becomes real, and the neurosis is the in the moment reward decision complex. I'm guessing.
It's the latching onto the narrative. So I was rewarded. I was punished. I was this, that, and the other. I must fix the narrative again. It's not about the narrative being broken.
But that's a hijacking of a proper model, which would be like, okay, this narrative is being constructed again. This happened again.
So what I was trying to say is that things like solipsism, objectivism, psychosis, neurosis, all of these different aspects that seem so structurally bound become qualities of moments in your presence. So you will immerse yourself in the dream by saying, oh, this was psychosis, this was neurosis, this was dream, this was moment, this was what were the other words? This was objectivism, this was solipsism, right? Like all of these different things that seem to be like what you're being run through are just present to you in the moment. And your immersion in the dream is to see those things cycle and cycle and cycle.
What I liked about that
and
is
it stays the same.
The idea of presence before immersion, it kind of really makes sense because you have to set yourself up for what your archetype
What
of
you're immersing yourself
cognition
into,
is.
yeah.
And then
It builds it up.
and then to be immersed into something that feels like you're diving back into a soup kind of thing, which of course is the
Right.
whole the story and the world. The
So
reified.
all of the qualities of the moment make this story, which comes back as a quality of this moment, aka there's all these qualities in the moment plus the story coming through and
Right.
over and over and over. And so your story stays the same. Do you see how the narrative stays the same? Because it's only
And-
about the narratives going over and over and over.
Different people have different experiences of this too, I think, because some people, it seems, can come right out into the moment, into which in kind of a derealization, depersonalization,
Yes.
seeing these weird
It's actually
it's like you're like observing what's going on because you always could.
It is actually
Right?
It is actually
Without the model at all to communicate even to yourself and hear his model speak, right?
depersonalization.
That I just connected that for myself.
Depersonalization is the same event without a way to recognize what
This
it
is why you want a language to speak to yourself when going through spiritual type experiences.
So you have depersonalization as one problem. You have the what we call the dark night of the soul is another problem in which you're brought to this realization without any fallback.
Like support,
Right.
economic support. You mean?
And
all
I think
that?
you know what those probably are this. I don't know how to differentiate the two actually, because that is what is happening. You
I
you
think-
you lose sight of your own egoic narratives without any actual
Right.
recourse.
No, you're.
Depersonalization
I think you're
is
very
pretty much that.
You're very right, but there's something more than that too. So it's not only the economic foundation is void, but also the model foundation is void. You don't have the language to talk to yourself about what just happened.
Right. So
which is fucked.
You've lost the part that doesn't
That's
work.
even worse
but
than
with
the
nothing-
outside world.
but nothing to
can't
replace
even
it with.
the inside world can't even understand you.
Right.
Like, how fucked is that? So you got to peel through like layers of shit
Yeah.
to even become normal enough.
So our argument is actually to start a process of recognizing the model prior to
Right.
that.
The participation.
Yes, I was going to say participant exactly.
Mhm.
Because
And-
membership
And not only
membership without participation.
and we've
is-
talked about dangers before as well too, and the
Oh,
reason
yeah.
why you would practice altruism without knowing why or what it is, to like gain those experiences of another human smiling at you in gratitude, because it never fucking happens in normal, McDonald's. You get your burger, blah blah blah. Like,
and you know what? Altruism does not mean what normally comes up in the mind for altruism. It's not a selflessness. Let's put it that way. Selflessness implies selfness.
that
And
negated.
and it's just kind of like
Oh, I know what self is. I'll not do that.
yeah,
Do,
it's kind of like ignoring. It's kind of like avoiding the problem from a different angle. You know what I mean? So
It's a
yes,
thought
you've
terminating cliche.
yeah, you've reframed it, yes, but you didn't actually make it go away. So altruism, from our perspective, is not selflessness. It's actually a complete dissolution of the concept of self and other to begin with,
Right.
in which selfishness and otherness
And that's
are
totally
part
weird.
of the narrative
It
rather
is
than
weird.
part of the actual.
But it's kind of like
quality of the
in the
moment.
moment seeing just matter flowing around in a way, like, and there's a need. In other words, like something needs. You see someone needs something, give them something, or like help out.
I believe personally that we've done a good job at pushing the idea of self, egoism, and all of that into the realm of dream and dream only. Dream being an emergent phenomena from moments.
Right.
Gives it a kind of lackluster, illusionary status.
Illusory. Yeah.
It's a pretty picture, but it's not
Right.
anything. It's jewelry.
Mm-hmm. And so altruism isn't, oh, I'm going to watch me help this and take the selfie while you're
Yeah,
giving the homeless
there's
person. It becomes your story on Facebook.
in our version of altruism, there's no you, there's no I. There is sympathy, there's empathy. That's altruism right there. Sympathy for artifact, empathy for narrative.
Right.
To understand it, you like obviously have to
And to unpack
know
it
the
further,
diagrams
the
and stuff.
sympathy for the artifact being what it looks like, empathy for the narrative being
What
there
it
is there are other living creatures like yourself which are having a story right now,
but dreaming
and
through
they
the
aren't
moment.
they aren't you, but they are you in a way that they're doing the same exact thing you're doing.
And
So go check that shit out.
and the most empathetic narrative is that a dream is running its course through the moment. That is true for you. That is true for me. That is true for
Mhm.
our interaction. That is true for this interaction, and so on and
Sure,
so
yeah.
forth. And so
Lots of dreams.
that is the only thing that really is happening. What else is there to empathize with? Because everything else is an artificial outflow out of that one thing that is
Mhm.
happening.
So we're all dreaming.
And that's the narrative with which empathize. Not the narratives from the dreams, but
Themselves, the narrative
yeah,
of the fact of,
of the fact of
the
the dream.
dreaming, dreamers,
which only incidentally appears in the dream. So it's like a
Yeah.
special one.
which somehow points back to the moment
Yeah.
in which this dream is all being constructed, and where we only have a chance of understanding that we're all actually doing it.
The dream of I'm dreaming. The lucid dream.
Hmm. Indeed. I'm going to
Lucidity
be
is
the
an
one
interesting
to
subject. Break?
call it a break, and we shall be right back.
I'm on board.
I'm gonna stop that so we don't get any content strikes.
For
And-
the
yeah.
uninitiated, we had just listened to a couple of songs because we
was a good
got a
break.
bit nostalgic.
It was a good break. We were really break that one up. Yeah, but yeah, we listened to some Korn and some Tool, and I was saying anyways, like how it's great to remember where we came from.
Yeah.
And like the traumas in our past, even though we don't relate directly, like we don't empathize
Yeah.
per se with what the singer is saying.
I think
In those early days.
I think what you're trying to say, refer back to, is when I said I don't feel the same as what I used to feel like when I listened to Korn back in my
Yeah,
youth.
which is a good thing. And even many of these bands also progress through their albums, right? Like you can see this whole arc, right?
You don't see it with Korn though. It's the one band that you don't see
I know.
it with.
Interesting.
I don't think they cut past their trauma, or if they did, I did hear a
Like
couple
they
of,
might be chill now, but
from what I understand in their interviews of late, what Jonathan Davis was talking about is there are still so many kids, which is how he got started on to singing to begin with, to help. To make himself
Getting,
relatable to
abused.
the trauma that the kids would go through. He stated that basically that never went away, and so
yeah, but in
and so-
society it never did go away still.
and so,
So
he
how
took
could
it. So he's taking
taken it on
him.
himself.
Yeah.
That's
That's the thing.
That's
so
a
it's not like
yeah. I get
it's not a
that,
it's
yeah.
not a point against Korn itself. It's more like wow, the more things did change for people do grow.
Yeah, I never knew
There
about
is
that,
this
but that does.
stagnation that the society is still experiencing. Well, we're talking about the stagnation all
Like
the time.
as an artist, as a career, you want to have an arc and like get
Growth.
out at some point and then retire. But
Well, to see the maturity of a person is beautiful, right?
for true,
When you see a person stuck in a gutter, it feels ugly.
but we have to realize society in many ways has not progressed and gotten worse.
So it's a kudos to actually the Korn's point in that sense,
Right.
in that the personal growth is yes, it's probably is
Like I thought they got more
reflected in
chill.
their
In their
no,
attitude and all that. Like
it's
I
probably reflected in their interpersonal space, but what they're trying to reflect back hasn't changed because they quite adamantly insisted on the fact that shit hasn't changed for people.
So what happened with Head though? Like he went like religious and then, but did they ever get back together with him? I forget.
The drummer left.
Right.
David left.
Mm.
They had a fallout, the nature of which I have no concept of.
Right. Yeah, I don't know about that, but there was some drama. So Head's back. I just forget like.
Had returned, David left.
Right.
There's still a five-person group.
Nice. Just new drummer kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And but again, like it points to kind of commitment and that society isn't fixed in these ways and abuse happens big time all over the place. Not only on the family scale, but human trafficking and all this kind of stuff. Like it's
I think you're trying to reflect the point you just made on Telegram a couple of days back. It's
oh
like-
god.
So it was something to do with the effect of what was it?
Well, it's about the economy, about economics, and the way things are in economy.
Yeah, but what led you to make the statement? Oh, so such and such and such. So you may as well
It's like-
learn all the dynamics
it's like
of human trafficking instead of actually fixing the problem or something
Yeah.
to that effect.
Yeah, it was like
Because,
the point was
economy.
about like studying economics and to my mind reifying economics in the sense
a reality,
as the
right.
way that they are today. And I likened it to, well, if you were thinking to try and acquire sex on the market,
Right.
well,
Right.
what you're gonna do is study the like the human trafficking
economics.
the economics of human trafficking.
Instead of
And
building
then-
up a relationship with a person.
Because it is what it is. That's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
economics. It exists. That's the market. Hey,
Yeah, like everything is shuffled off into it,
Right.
and so it's got to be.
this is the danger of that reification, because you
Right.
just
So
go
you-
from one assumption to another. So if you don't start with the model, no matter what you're studying, will always be tilted this way.
So basically, what you
You'll
were
be
saying.
tilted forever.
So what you were saying is like to solve a very human problem, like wanting and needing to have sex with another person, or
Right.
any kind of relationship, really. Instead of actually developing social relationships, you go to the market and buy what it is you're supposedly are in the quest of obtaining.
Right.
Sounds fucking dirty.
That was a bit of a snap, but yeah, I was trying to snap at the idea that we can just learn economics and do it better, and I'll game the system. And
As
it's
soon
all,
as I
it's
saw
all
that, I'm like, holy shit, he went right for the jugular right there.
It's this,
He
yeah,
just
like,
fucking killed it.
just playing the game.
But, all things aside, kudos to Paulo who brought up the points, because Paulo, I believe...
Paulo is a content master.
He's-
We'll say that.
Paulo is young, first of all, and is...
That's how I came
He's
into
gaining experience.
a lot of communities, is just by expressing the shit out of your opinion, and wait for those who dare to push back on you.
Yeah.
And those are the best people.
And I
Right.
love his enthusiasm, like... Just so... in case you're watching this, Paulo, I fucking love you, man. Like, never, ever, ever, ever think otherwise.
245, Paulo mentions. Be sure to tag him in.
Nice. So yeah, what I love about his points specifically is that he's very contrarian, and he actually this is like my take. So, and this is part of the why I love this interaction, is that he keeps everything in check in a sense too, because he's coming at it from like a purely systemic point of view, and so
Paulo's our junkyard dog.
what does that mean?
That's a dog who protects a junkyard.
Oh,
And it's the meanest type you've ever known.
yeah, but that's what makes him so endearing.
Gets the
Anyway,
job done.
We
know that
absolutely love you, man. Like, this is
Yeah,
not
Paulo, bro.
It's not it's not sarcasm. It's not anything. I love the dynamic. We are obviously butting heads hard.
That's a thing that in many spaces becomes a problem
Yeah.
easily, the butting heads thing. At least if we understand that we're doing it for a higher purpose, kind of like we're working something out. None of us know everything.
I'll toot our horn here. We've
not
been
bad.
we've been given the status of being the one and only community in which people have experienced the ability to express completely contradictory opinions in a completely friendly way, with
And not
nobody
get
losing their
murdered.
shit, except for a few outlying situations in which a person was introduced to the community, would not grasp how it flows,
I think-
and had ended up
Yeah,
leaving.
that happens quite a bit.
And then very few
But
specific times
I think it's about the
escorted out.
the discussions with about spectrum of stupidity and all this kind of reification stuff. If you have that as your archetype underlying for your chat group, then everybody knows you basically can express however you want, and it's taken and just broken apart, and
Into the spectrum of stupidity. So
right,
whatever
everybody
I say,
treated the same way. In other words, from our own way, like you get ripped apart sometimes for your kind of
Well,
like
yeah, this
too
is-
too far. That sounds really left.
Why do I
far
mention
left or
Paulo?
whatever.
Why do I mention Paulo? Who's trying to rip me apart all the time? Paulo.
He does rip tear your a-hole a couple time.
Tries.
Too, right?
I will say he tries.
He tries, but in a way like
he's formidable. He's very formidable. So shout out, buddy, for sure.
Mhm.
I love it.
No, but that is great, and this is the archetype of the conversation. I think.
Yeah.
It has to be open like that. That even if there's a fallout, like there's contingencies, protocols, right? For relationship protocols.
Well, often
If things blow up, come back a day later.
if
Whatever.
I can qualify it,
Right.
what happens is that he will state something that I probably had thought about some time ago. So I'm kind of in a mode of okay. So what were my conclusions from way back when, and why were
Not
they
to contradict yourself.
why were they those conclusions and all of that stuff? So I'm kind of like I'm looking at a part of my life that's in my history to answer his questions
we
a
all
lot of the time.
have to, but yeah.
And that's why I perceive him as a young fella. Paulo, by the way, you've never contradicted that understanding of mine. I think you're in your early 20s, but again, that's just me guessing based on
I think
based on the fact that whenever
thought he told us how old he is, something like that.
yeah. But I'm more basing it on the fact that whenever he comes up with something, I have to dig back. So it's kind of like an experiential gap, if you will. So that's part of why there's a grind going on. I think we're different in our
with the
experiences.
academic literature perspective. You have to be building on a canon. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
You can't not. And anytime you do, that should be like that's a contradiction.
The problem is that our canon is like you have Buddhism over here 2,500 years ago.
Right.
You have model speak over here.
And things change too. People change, our understandings change. So you should feel more free to say what in the moment you think is right.
Oh, I do.
And if someone brings it up, that's a moment for reflection, right? Ideally that doesn't happen, but yeah, and you should try not that it doesn't happen. But
so much like the conversation, much like the intro for today, me saying I'm sorry for making it seem like I don't listen to you.
right.
Paulo, same deal. If it sounds like I'm just not taking in what you're saying, and I'm just like droning on, it isn't because I didn't take it in. I just have a glitch in my matrix, if you will, that sometimes blocks me from pushing out the acknowledge message to you, right? So it looks like I don't acknowledge things.
That is tough, and that's a matter of probably practice. Honestly, like we all know it's not right, but at the same time, and we've all done it where we have an idea flow and we're in our flow, and the idea flows are coming out, and it's a chat, right? Everybody can post a chat. Nobody has a...
So accountability. This is what I'm trying to tackle in my session right now. I'm talking about my awareness of these things, and in some sense, I'm trying to practice what I'm preaching about the domains of practice, progress. I'm aware. I'm accountable. I'm working on my discipline in that regard, right? So it follows to say that to you. It follows to say that to you, Paulo, and anybody else that I interact with, really, that has ever had that feeling, really. Because I know that there's a slight difference between what my mind is doing and what my body is doing.
I think it's a challenge we all have to balance the inputs and outputs.
I believe
of conversation and all that.
I believe
that's
that.
tough. That ain't easy.
I believe that. I just think that I have a more pronounced distinction and a more notable one. Meaning, yes,
Right.
It's more there,
And probably due to the
but I'm
temperamental
also able
dispositions.
to. But I'm also more able to bring it into my own awareness because it's this much more pronounced. So for somebody who it's not so pronounced for, convincing them that there is a discrepancy would be a much more difficult ordeal.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm only susceptible to that line of thought because I feel it. I feel the difference.
And then your problem is constructing and adopting protocols to, when this is happening, okay, I'm going to do this.
I need to
and that.
contextualize more because I'm always decontextualizing.
Like, let's say
I'm doing universal stuff in my head,
talking.
but I need to contextualize it. That translation layer. So, in my Telegram, I was talking about you take the terms, you translate them to your own internal monologue, and then you retranslate them again to external monologue. Somewhere in between those translations, something is off.
I got what you were
For-
just saying, but
for
I didn't
everyone.
get the connection there. I was writing something
So,
down. Communication.
I'm doing partial protocols. I'm not applying all of them. So I'm tackling some layers, but not all of them. I interpret what you say, but I don't feed it back into the ether. So you don't have any anchors to hold on to. When I do that, I'm running over, yes.
So there's two ways to deal with interruption when talking. That I wrote down. One is write down your idea and wait. The idea is that's wait. So your wait. I think there's more to it than this.
That's a delay.
There's more to it than this. But the other is ignore.
Yeah, ignore too.
Ignore.
But what about this situation where I was saying I do run over, but I'm not ignoring? Where I take the feedback, and I fail to respond to it.
Right. And also, what happens when you write it down, but you still forget to wait and then re-inject?
Okay, so these are idealized, and then there's tangents on that.
Right. There's kind of a passive or an active. The active being like continue to dominate media or attempt to. Passive is like somehow pull back and reform and wait for opportunity. So that's a bit of a protocol there, right? There's two. And just to know that these exist, I think this is not you don't like this.
No, I do. I want to add.
I just don't think. Can you move the card up?
Wait.
Okay.
I probably misspelled it. Fuck.
Perfect. Etiquette.
Yeah.
Right.
So, etiquette. We've touched on this before in a number of different ways, but it's a disposition towards coherence itself. And it's just a quality of the conversation, if you will, is that the speaker
So
is
why
the guest.
why would you be spewing words out at somebody if they're the master?
It's a function. It's a function of dissipation of energy.
I get it, but in the moment, I mean, anybody could, if there's a blockage of communication, then it's like there has to be both would step back and renegotiate. Okay, who's on track here? You know, maybe, right?
That's secondary. The first thing is that
So etiquette, you are a guest in the master's domain,
guest,
but they are also a guest
Guest.
in your domain as master in a sense.
yeah, if this is the speaker, this is the guest, this is the master. If this is the speaker, this is the guest, and this is the master.
Right.
So in the conversational context,
Okay.
Two guests,
So
two masters.
I'm seeing something here that conversation is a switching back and forth of rules.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And when you don't switch back and forth rules, it leans one way. You have different effects.
Balances off.
Let's say, like a teacher at the front of the class, most students aren't asking questions as a broadcast. It's a teacher, right? That's an example of just an organizational structure of people, right? But you have a one master in this kind of sense, kind of asking, does anybody ask a question? Does anybody have a question, right? That makes it a feedback thing to ask the class or the hall.
Yeah, if you're talking about
any good teacher has to be in
you-
conversation.
You're talking about a situation in which
and
somebody has
suddenly that student over there at that desk, they're the master now of the hall.
So you're talking about a situation in which we have the guest master dual setup, while at the same time you have a perspective of faith in the teaching, faith in the learning.
Right.
Right. So
the teacher has faith in the learning.
So you have a master learner and a master teacher.
Mm-hmm.
That's the respect boundaries, if you will. And you're a guest in those boundaries. Your job from both angles is to approach the other person as a master of that. So if they're the knowledge feeder, you're the knowledge taker.
Yeah.
You are the master of that.
So this is very...
job of... See, your job as a master, being a guest of the learner master, if you will, is to provide for their needs.
Right.
They are the demand.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, no, sorry.
Well, demands come from both sides, but especially the learner, the master learner, their main demand is to learn that domain.
I think the idea is there, but the way I articulated it sucks, so I do apologize for that.
But, however, master teacher, master learner, that's the environment.
That's the template, yeah.
And it's an interaction between those. Typically, the teacher is taking a role of master in their continual broadcast, let's say, with periodical feedback moments.
So
like,
yeah,
there must be
that's actually great. You pointed it out. The teacher is the master of the broadcast. The learner is the master of the conversation. Because if the broadcast makes no sense to the learner,
right,
they need to take the lead on what it is that needs to be clarified.
Right. Right.
And it is the job, the master's job, the teacher's job, as the guest
in conversation
in the learner's house,
when there's a conversation,
to give them that
That's
information.
interesting. So there's definitely like two major domains.
Why are you entering their house if you're not giving them that information? You are there humbly.
I like that.
Much like they are there humbly.
So this is the facilitator also structure.
Oh yeah, it's the entire structure.
We're having somebody.
It's the etiquette structure.
Broadcast. Well, yeah.
That is etiquette, really.
Conversation is the goal, though. And
I like how you brought it to broadcast and conversation, because broadcast and conversation is literally the two areas in which master guest etiquette becomes concrete.
Mm-hmm.
That's the spot.
I think so, because master has something to broadcast,
and the student has something to give feedback to.
All the student can do is just keep cycling through, sifting for synchronicity.
Mwah. Love it.
Oh yeah.
With that,
I'm with you. On your marks, get set.
more.
Okay, good. Good. Just we're back, and we're back.
Back again. Da-na-na.
Once again.
Tell some men. Na-na-na, 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 na-na-na-na-na-na. Skills.
Tell a friend.
Tell some men. Shady's back.
Oh damn. Do 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 do. Where were we? Oh yeah, maybe this.
So we kind of covered a couple of interesting topics that
Yes, we did.
never come up before.
We did manage to
One of them being
find
how
some good tangents.
so you articulated your push for medium. I think you've done it before, but I don't think.
Yes,
but I don't
lots
think
of
we've
times.
consolidated this well before.
Hit
in
me.
that
Hit me.
in that medium appears even in the previous layers. So what you're trying to
Right.
get to is a reiteration of
Correct.
of,
Yeah,
of that.
it is all. It's media all the way up and down.
Whereas I'm presenting as to the fact that it's like why media has to reiterate to begin with, which is my tangential points, because the model works this way, that way, the other way. That's why it's culminates in another form of media. And interestingly enough,
It's cast layers.
I didn't think about it at the time, but do you remember before we started recording, I was talking about how language is 3 times layered, if you will. First, you have your language, your
Right.
words, your grammar, the quantitative elements of the language. Then you have your glossary. So we have the dictionary. Then we have the glossary. The point there being introducing a mechanism as to how to reuse said language, not just its grammatical forms, but rather what to make of the grammars that are given to us from the said language. How to appropriate it properly. And the third language is to construct an entire narrative arcs out of that build up. So there's like this triple layer, which corresponds to narrative, hyper-narrative, and meta-narrative
Interesting, yeah.
layers, and also corresponds to the computational, synthetic computation, and sentient machine guilds, all part and parcel of the same subject.
Yeah, I found interesting how you characterized our discussion about the book itself as a mythology to convey mythology, right?
Right. Yeah.
And
Or mythological structurings, right? The model, if you
And
will.
I guess this is one reason why I'm fixated on the idea of this role of guild facilitator as being something that can be picked up at the end of reading this book. Use the book to do that. Is that in mythology we find idols, kind of like to look up to, heroes, right?
Right.
And I want this guild facilitator archetype to be like the myth, the hero that emerges from the book, kind of.
The Grandmaster. That's the archetype, right? Like the perfectly coherent / isomorphic /
Of
archetype.
Of course, in this kind of context, light.
The
Facilitation of the
role,
guild.
The facilitator is that role
Right.
model to aspire to, hence it's
Right.
also doubling up as the
Yeah.
Grandmaster.
Anything like that, you couldn't separate it from such.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Look,
So that's it. That's that's
Grandmastery is like the point of perfect coherence. So
like the book as a mythology has to prepare grandmasters, sort of guild
Out of
facilitators.
out of members, yeah.
Right.
So we touched a bit about how agile economics,
Mm-hmm.
in that it's a lot like I don't know if you're familiar with issues in programming land being resolved step by step.
Iteratively.
Yeah, so you have a backlog.
I thought you were talking about the album issues.
Yeah, you have a backlog. Then you have the to-do list, what needs to be done right now, out of which to prioritize. Then you have
Mhm.
the in progress,
Well, by backlog, don't you mean like problem tickets or what?
just records of demands.
Yeah, that's
the,
what.
the a bucket
So
itself. It's managed. It's managed by priority.
now, I
It's managed separately. That's
I
why it's a
work
backlog.
at a help desk for a large bank, and which utilized this type of a system. I forget what it was called, but it's a ticketing problem system.
It's
So
very
every customer, quote unquote, who calls in, it was all internal. Their problem is received by phone by me, for example,
Mhm.
and I initially I create a ticket which is categorized as to what their problem is like.
Yep.
Right. I give my overview notes, whatever, like a paragraph of something, and then it's categorized into, was this a computer issue? Was it a printer issue? Was it like software? Did it have to go to, like, was it a network issue?
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, that's the
So
job of the master.
this
in
flow.
in the institute.
What I'm saying is I understand this flow, and then a ticket gets saved, and then this is like, now it's like an economy of demands
Mhm.
on,
Spec-
right, on the help desk.
So now you have all these tickets in the backlog,
Mhm.
which some process takes and prioritizes. Right. This
Well,
The-
we don't have that. What was it called? ITL or something?
so in the more active system, as to what you just described.
Because
Right.
you just get that ticket assigned to your personal ego identity, if you will. Now it's you have a stack of problems that you have to deal with, whether you send them off here or there. As soon as you take in the ticket, it's your problem.
Okay,
You are
well-
managing that problem.
Okay, take that, but without this component.
So I want to bridge that, because I bet most people are more familiar with that kind of a
Yeah,
system.
yeah. So you would take this component out. The ticket is created, done. It's in the backlog.
Right. Now, it's not that anybody else can't look at your tickets and,
Right.
and even take them from you and just fix it, but that doesn't...
No, it's just that
in-
now it's out in the ether. The
In a
list of-
typical IT environment,
what I'm
help
trying
desk, you
what
wouldn't...
I'm trying to say is that it's in the list of demands. So you take what you just said, and start ignoring everything else about the processes particular to the company, because we have our own
Yeah.
stuff too.
But I mean, that's like
that I could bring
ticketing...
into it.
I think
So-
that's a like help desk.
Yeah,
IT help desk, that's how they do it.
yeah.
I think.
So
I
take,
just assume because...
so take that concept. So take that concept
Right.
of simply accumulating this backlog
yeah.
of things.
Yeah, no,
those are your
the
demands.
list stretches on, and like half the people get forgotten, and
At
then,
the same time, you have something happening right now. You're fixing something right now.
because you can't stop taking phone calls.
Forget.
You're not allowed to break between. Well, I'm
Okay,
just kidding. That's kind of...
Let's leave your company and just go back into the general ether of
But
things.
I want there to be a...
Yeah.
What do you call it? A juxtaposition of...
I'm
just giving
gonna
the
bring my
corporate
own.
world so that people can relate.
I'm gonna bring my own.
Let's
that is
bring it.
also
So
from
I'm
the
going to
same
keep
thing.
injecting the corporate world.
I'm in the software world. Very similar. Problem, ticket. Problem, ticket. Problem, ticket. Problem.
And the
Category-
ticket gets assigned to somebody. That's the key.
No,
By
it's not-
default, it's
at
to
first,
you.
At first, in our scenario, there's no assignment. There's only reporting. Who reported it is assigned, but they're not.
Okay.
They're not going to be
So
resolving
now-
this problem.
So this is another corporate discrepancy, right? Another way that people could be familiar with it.
Their responsibility ends with making sure that the details of the ticket capture the work that is to be done. Past that point, it's for the people doing the work.
Now, what if they haven't done that yet, or they just always assume it? What if they just give it off into the ether? It hasn't been captured properly.
No, that's part of the reporting. Like if you're capturing a ticket, that your responsibility is to
But
capture.
Is there a point where you can start working on the ticket and go for lunch, and then it's in your queue?
Yes.
So there you go. It's assigned to you first off. Any ticket you open is owned by you. Then you can pass it on to a pool of this or that. I think this is archetypal stuff for that.
Okay, there's a concrete amount of work
But you're saying
that
for,
that makes the ticket complete
for
and makes the ticket incomplete.
and then when
Up
it's
until
complete,
the point it is that it's complete, it's your responsibility. Past the point that it is complete,
Yeah.
it is not necessarily.
and it should be completed pretty quickly, you would think.
Yes,
Like
that's
10, 15 minutes or
that
something.
that goes without saying because
you make it and then you just
that
throw
goes
it
without
off.
saying because if you need to create a record of something, you need to create the record of something because otherwise, how is the demand going to be captured?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, step
Right.
one, that's
Yeah,
where
this is great. I'm happy that we're just talking shop on corporate
so
ticket management.
so now we have this unmanaged bucket though, and this is where I wanted to get to. On the flip side of this, you have what's happening right now. Which problem you're resolving right now? You're probably already working on a ticket. This work affects the order
Yeah,
of
yeah,
priority
yeah.
over here.
So there needs to be like
There's
the meta.
feedback.
The meta schedule needs to be there to
That-
analyze
that's
that
what I'm getting to.
and
Yeah.
say what ticket are you working on there, bud? Is that actually what we need right now?
On top of that, that order is getting that you need to section off the top portion and bring it on to to-do list. So if you were to imagine a virtual sub list,
What's the top portion? More significant or?
yeah, the priority. So if your top priority is up there,
Yeah.
here, next,
Okay.
next, a window of that is
Yeah,
currently
like
like
your main
the
dashboard.
main thing to get started working on, which can be taken on
Right.
a random, like you don't have
Now-
in parallel. That's what I'm saying. But
Don't
you have to have
these
that.
don't these jobs summarize kind of to each other? Because you're going to be able to see like, okay, there's 3 projects. One is big, but the subtasks of that project are like this, that, and that. So like your dashboard should be able to zoom out into like, okay, the project viewing itself, but what about in comparison with other projects in the company and
Yeah, well,
so on and
what
so
what
on.
you will have happen is that bits and pieces of different projects are getting accomplished at the same time. Right?
Mhm.
The accomplishments of these will feed back into the long edit. So, if you have a project that has this, and this task, and you have another project with all of these tasks, if you put them into the backlog, the arrangements of all the tasks, regardless of project, are getting their own priority based on what's being done. So even though the tasks are grouped here as this constitutes the completion of this project
Yeah,
and that
yeah.
project,
That's like a logical afterthought almost.
and
A-
so
as to which task is the most immediate for accomplishing the most of everything.
and so if you note in this setup, if 2 projects have 1 task that
Mhm.
bubbles up to the top,
Right.
it can get done for both
And-
at the same time.
There's timing. There's time as well, like man hours, and like what if just
Yes, on top of that.
what if accomplishing this one task will unleash like 2 more projects, which just let everybody work.
Yeah.
So obviously this is number 1, even though it's like some sub project of something.
And this is why you want to identify your projects, yes, by task, but then you put them all into the backlog and forget about the project boundary
Right.
and just get the tasks
yeah.
done. And eventually the projects are emergent
Right.
out of that.
Yeah. So the
mix.
meta schedule is kind of like a melting pot of higher ideals into the subtasks, which themselves converge into kind of figuring out what the best path is to get everything done.
So you have a decay and a consolidation event in the
Mhm.
process. And so as the tasks move on from in progress to QA, so I'm going to use my company's current framing,
No need to name names.
but you move it from like in progress to code review to QA ready to QA done and failed and come back, or QA done and ready for release.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's a little bit too involved. This actually needs to be broken down into more simpler steps. doing QA should be its own task, for example, going from in progress to done. Let's put it that way.
Well, everything breaks down. This is that holonic model stuff, right?
So yeah, so if we take this overcomplicated column structure, reduce it a little bit slightly, and make sure that things like QA in progress and QA done is another task instead of a feature of a task, you can actually have a more dynamic meta schedule, because if QA is done and it's wrong, then the next bit of work can be its own task and scheduled accordingly again. So you can remanage it in the same way always. Always push it back to the meta schedule, and the needle is never on the same track as it's intended to be. It just keeps jumping around. So if you're on a vinyl record, what would happen is that you're playing a song and you get bumped off to another song.
And you're kind of like, seems like you're pointing at the ability to look at the label itself as a task itself, to kind of like homogenize just the landscape as being critical to that.
Yeah. So this is the basic operative method behind both the institution as a corporation and the corporation as a corporation. Right. That's all the demands are these tasks, and the supplies are the movements.
So it's sort of like
through.
the institution translating or presenting a meta schedule is like translating between the higher kind of order of things and the lower get it done tasks.
Yeah, and the higher order could basically be put this corporation on task for this demand.
Right.
You know?
But I mean, also there's so many other demands all together, and what does that, how do you boil that down to something that
sorry.
can be...
What I was trying to say with that is that they both operate as corporation. So because everybody's supplying something, the institute is supplying demands, right? So they collect the demand, and then they
representation of demands.
Yeah, so they move like, is this demand met? Is it done? Right? That's its meta schedule. On the corporate side is like, what does it take to meet this demand? So we have our demands, right? So it's like this task, this task, this task. So that's where it's blows up into its components of things to do. So you have what's to do, how to do.
But then also every corporation can be divided into many different segments with all their demand.
All the way up to the individual person who
Order.
has hunger and fitness activities as part of their demands. That's where fitness comes in as a concern, right? Am I fitting into the demand structure here, right? Fitness into the environment that is presented in front of you.
Okay. We haven't spoken the word fitness in a while.
Well, it's a difficult one.
And this is holonic model again.
Oh yeah.
I thought you were talking about
fitness,
like getting buff.
No, fitness,
beefing up.
Fitness is focus. So we're talking about hygiene, we're talking about nutrition, rest, and fitness.
Fitness is the social, is it not?
Yes.
And that implies a connection with others.
Yes, fitness.
In other words, each holon is fit to fit into other holons. Fit into other holons.
As part of a holonic structure is itself a holon.
There's a sort of qualitative scale to that fitness, if you will.
Right.
So I don't know if we should get into that, but that's holonic model. That's
Perfect.
Yep. Timing is perfect. We got about another 15 minutes. Pardon for the noise.
That time
But-
it was you.
Yeah, well, I do it pretty quiet, but I didn't overload, but that was like half a decibel away. Yeah, it's been a great live stream. I don't think we solved the heart of the guild, although like we've continued on.
So moving the cards across columns, that's the beat of the heart.
Moving the what?
When cards move across the columns in the from the backlog to the to-do list to the in progress list to the done list.
Hmm.
Each
Good.
of those movements.
Yes. No,
That's
I
a
like
beat.
this. I like this. Okay.
That's moment. That's what moment is
So
in every context.
we need a regular way to move cards through the demand and supply structure. And I don't really know what that looks like exactly, but
Good old nebulousness. Rearing its ugly head again.
yeah, this isn't an angle we've taken with the cards yet. I don't think it is.
Well, I don't think I ever tried to push for this articulation yet before, but that's been in the back of my mind for quite a while. Agile economics, in its essential structure, is this taking a demand and moving it through the columns to create the supply. By taking it through the columns, I'm talking about taking the demand report in appropriately.
Depending on what the structure
when
is, I guess.
When it's in progress, it's assigned to somebody, obviously.
Yeah.
When it's done, it's assigned to
No,
somebody.
I'm familiar
obviously.
with that. I like that. The idea of a ticketing system. And that to me cuts right to the heart of why do I want media in the first place? It's so you don't fucking forget about shit.
So I would think that the cards need to supplant this cycle to make themselves relevant. That's what would make them a proper medium for is to be able to deal with the economics. Because economics is about reification, forwards and backwards, always, right?
Mhm.
It's literally about trying to get the representational system in line
It's
with
kind
the
of like
represented.
it all seems like simple, tiny messages, whereas like a literature seems like it's got to be a book or something.
Another way of saying it, we're trying to manage what's here by taking,
Here?
layer,
Okay.
one layer here, to take it into another representational layer, the ticket system, the economic layer, and to push back. We've said this before in the beginning of the our conversation today.
Yeah.
So the goal is so that you take what's here, push it up here into a representational layer, do some some shuffling
This is
around,
facilitation.
and then represent that shuffling around over here, right?
The point
The
of
back and forth.
facilitation, right? That do make sense.
So the economy is literally how you would do that. How do you do the symbol shuffling up here properly so that it does reflect isomorphically back down on the reification front?
Right.
So that the reification front and the download part can be uploaded again and again and again. Because if you don't do that, you get that initial problem that I was hammering on in the last couple of meetings, talking about how reification doesn't go back up. To get it to go back up, it has to be isomorphic with how it's representing its lower layer.
So this is like the first 5 minutes of the speech for the
Yeah.
facilitator, where
Yeah.
you have to describe the archetype.
It's literally coming right back to it in a different format. So, with that being the responsibility of the Economy Guild, the other nebulous thing we've talked about and we didn't really connect with everything is the Trade Guild. And I think the picture I've painted for it is actually quite good from the perspective of it does all of the accounting for it to relay back to the system the information. So it creates a membrane through an accounting framework, right?
Mhm.
So a balance sheet, if you will, a long ass balance sheet, a cross guild, cross corporation involved in guild. The point of this balance
Whoa,
sheet.
I just got a vision of that.
The point of this balance sheet is to create this abstract membrane for so that the system cannot penetrate as to what is
Okay.
legally is possible within itself. It's copyright used for copyleft.
Like the fact that there's no justification for transactions of material within the guild almost makes it seem like any like systemic tracking and justification won't look right. Like there's no obfuscation medium which penetrates that system. So what do you say? You just say it's a commune? Or like,
No. What do you say to the situation of a corporation here owns building here, who houses people there, who work for corporation here,
I know.
that pays back for the corporation here for the housing of here?
Like that's what I'm saying. I think that has to be spelled out literally for the tax.
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
And this is this is the purpose
Yes.
of
The trade guild.
trade guild. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay,
To
yeah,
keep
yeah.
all of that in line.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't. There's no.
Because ultimately it does make sense
Yeah.
to my mind, but
The only thing you're doing is like, oh, it's you're housing.
But it's
you're
just
so the way to do it is like the corporation that houses these people here are legally have no affiliation in the system with the people who are living here, who are working for a corporation here. Right, like all the legalese stuff is contracted out and all of that stuff. So there's no reason to look into it. It's just people's. It's just profit supporting profit,
right
and work.
So
and here and work and
the trade guild has like a dashboard which is I think largely separated into two major categories. One is like
Physical.
internally supplied, and one is like ephemerally supplied
Yeah.
through the market.
yeah.
And there's always a balance, and you want to kind of expand your capacity to produce local and all that kind of
reason
stuff.
for the balance sheet is to keep shit legal.
Right? Yeah, it's not about anything other than that.
It's not to like circumvent anything. It's to actually keep it all within the the same structure. The difference the difference between the attempts that have been made and the attempts that in this what I'm describing is that all of these things used to be like unified and were targeted because they were like a thing. They were
Right.
they were a registered thing on paper. There is no paper trail to the guild, which the system hates.
Just not hates, but can't see, can't understand. But I think the kind of atomization, there's an atomization factor here a little bit, which makes it seem like the ownership is distributed, ideally among as many as possible, right? So that's what it looks like to the system. And remember what I was talking about earlier, the corporations that rise up and come and fall. The actual ownership of what the materials were used to do that, the corporation
What will be important
should ideally be just spread out.
What will be important is for one side of the corporation of the trade guild is to say to the system is that yes, these assets are completely and specifically allocated,
Owned by somebody.
owned by something.
Right.
But on the flip side, nobody has to care. Like you don't care
Right. Well,
because that's not what determines its availability. Its availability is determined by its availability.
And you got to think about, like, let's say a guild community, whatever, and you've got some rich holdouts, let's say, but hey, some of them kind of see the light and they love having barbecues with everybody and like giving.
If it's a guild community, they have to be seeing the light.
And well, exactly, but we're talking about a big chunk of capital, let's say, owner of whatever, and it's like, but this is transition. That's what should be expected is that people do still keep owning what they own, and by law can do whatever they want with it and kick people off it.
It is a
and this and
transition,
that.
but it's not a transition either.
And-
because there's no transition at the one end and a complete switch on the other.
It's like, what do you do with it? What do you do with that land? That property, right? Is it in service of your own self growth, just accumulating so that you can perpetuate only your self?
Land is just
like
part of
conceit
the
and all that?
land is just part of the environment.
No, but we're in the plateau of ownership, so everybody owns something.
In the plateau of ownership, there is paperwork representing what is what.
Right, and I wouldn't
That
argue
paperwork-
against that.
That paperwork is there. That paperwork is reflected in a different way on the internal aspect of it. It doesn't cross the horizon. If the trade guild is not doing its job, this will be obvious. But if the trade guild is doing its job perfectly, there's no contention points at all. To the system, it looks like everything is tickety-boo. Everything is capitalistically managed and is on point. On the internal environment, it doesn't fucking matter.
The trade
Shit
guild
just moves.
The trade guild is much more significant for owners of capital.
Yes.
That's interesting. It's much more impactful to them, and they can do much more with it than, you know.
Can we see that chart again? I forget which
Which one?
guild comes after it.
Natural guilds or
Yeah.
diplomacy? I'll find it.
All right. Yes. No, diplomacy comes. Trade is the last one before computing.
Right before.
So this is literally the membrane.
Trade. Right. Yeah, that's what we've been talking about.
It's literally the pinnacle of
And who could forget this chart?
of the emergence of the guild, if you will. Of course, there's no escaping computing and synthetic neural operating systems and sentient machinery.
Interesting.
But
That's
it's-
actually comp. Just an aside. But we often use, of course, charts that are super old and
Yeah, we're not
getting
all
there.
modern and
we're getting there. It's like it's
we're
like
not
when
all we're not all medium.
when the teacher pulls out the projector
we're not all medium.
and puts those translucent slides on it.
Fuck, do people even remember these?
No, they don't know about that.
I know my kids don't.
No. There will never be a projection machine, projector, whatever you call it.
I think there's a meme out there where like somebody, some kid hands their dad a diskette, and asking us like, why did you make the save icon? What the hell?
Yeah. Get it out of here. Yep. Well, of course, we are in the last 15-ish
Nice.
minutes, so we've kind of recapped, but that, I mean, was pretty great.
We did cover agile. We did cover trade. And those were the two finalizing aspects of how to visualize the guild, right? The dynamics of the guild itself. You have this membrane created by trade through the balance sheet, which
Yep.
connects with the actual corporate world in a static sense. Then you have agile economics taking their course within that membrane.
Mhm.
That's the community. That's the bubble that forms within the systemic ontological matrix. The point of our conversation.
That is pretty
To
great. I know it's
this.
right there, yeah.
Exactly.
Which has
So-
been a long time coming. That the idea of the cell, the
Well,
bubble.
5 meetings coming at least.
Yeah.
Because we were trying to relate how the guild
This is so wild,
would
man.
look in the
And-
system.
And we just went through all this corporate shit, like ticketing systems,
Mhm.
and it's like, well, society has needs, and anybody can create their own organization with themselves or with other people, in which you would need to utilize a ticketing type system, right? And this is the media. That's what I'm seeing. Like, I want to facilitate the
And
guild.
so point, who creates the tickets in this system? Out of, say, the member or the master or the grandmaster, who creates those tickets? In a normal corporate world,
Well, I think master. I think because it's a
in the normal
Well-
corporate world, yeah, managers, masters.
right, but you would
But
think it
this-
comes from the bottom, the most
Exactly.
bottom. It should come from.
All tickets come from
You should never.
members.
You shouldn't have to understand.
But all tickets come to members. If you're a master, you can still make a ticket because you're still a member.
Right, of course.
That's that. So
Yeah, yeah.
The key is not exclusion.
No, obviously. Yeah,
but
yeah,
the,
yeah.
But the demands, they're not coming from top down. They're coming from bottom up.
No, it makes perfect sense. The other thing is, tickets can be reviewed by masters for impact.
The master
I
is
think.
so. The member reports the problem.
Right.
The master is responsible for facilitating the ticket.
But that's what I'm saying. Like the shape of the ticket, what it looks like.
Right.
Only the master would really be able to
That's why they're
craft it.
they're crafting it, but they're not crafting it of their own.
Okay.
So
So I was right, I think.
understanding. They're crafting it based on what the report is from the membership is.
Right.
That's their only job. If they do anything else to it, they're not fucking masters. Just forget about it.
Right. But putting their
They're
own.
just
their
they're
own
just
ideas.
undermining the whole thing. That's charlatanism 101. So
That's
there
a-
is a very, very, very narrow space for mastery, if you will.
Right. And you're trying to point to the fact of what the member wants to describe as a problem in form of a ticket.
Mhm.
You don't have, it's not your call what that problem is. It just,
That's the problem.
you need to
How
shape
do
it
you-
into a ticket. Whatever
Right.
is coming at you needs to be in the shape of a ticket. With all its color,
And if that ticket does not represent the problem,
that
it's not a
is
ticket.
wrong. Mhm.
It's not a ticket.
Correct.
So it is another tall order, if you will.
Yeah, a little bit. That kind of, that is very interesting. The implications for a group of people.
Mm-hmm.
In that you have some who may understand how to write tickets, and that's who the membership has to come to those people who know how to write a ticket
And the humble
for impact.
the role of mastery is actually quite humbling. You're not there to exert
Yeah, you
an
have,
authoritative
right.
force because you're master.
aside from the structure itself of what a ticket is.
Yeah, the reason you're a master is because you can take that demand and shape it into the form of that makes sense to the model.
Right.
That's the job. Period. Like there's no denying demand. There's no vying for my demand is more important than yours. You can't do any of those things. They don't fit into the structure at all. So
That is very great.
half the problems that we're talking about that we're talking about resolving disappear. Not all, obviously, and again, idealistic sort of perspective on my part. Like let's say,
And we're
let's
talking
say
about,
it's working.
we're talking about a book for members too, and many domains are not to do at all with Portal Mountain or the guild or the model, right? But still, I feel like somebody who can facilitate the guild as a master, creating tickets and whatnot, and meaningful like interaction with members. Damn it! I wanted to connect it with that other thing, but I forgot. Um, that ability should
Hello?
project and extend into other domains.
We're almost done.
Burbs. Last thoughts. Yeah, just that my point was that somebody who has mastery in the guild, in the model and all that, able to facilitate or help facilitate membership, should be able to translate that skill into any other, let's say, non-model domain. And facilitate, even though it's not about the self and all this kind of occult, esoteric, whatever
What you mean by
subjects.
What you mean by facilitate is literally get the membership's demands
Right.
expressed.
But members of
take
this domain or that domain.
To take their
Not
take
necessarily
their
of the guild.
to take
right?
their implicit, poorly articulated model speak wise demands into model speak.
Right. From
Yeah, this is it. This is it.
Among guests.
The only job of the master is to take any demand from a member and translate it into model speak. Because once it's at model speak level, it is there for everybody to understand as what priorities are.
Right.
It normalizes everything.
I think so. And like that's what I was trying to point at is you can extend this into any domain, any business, any shop.
Right.
And like facilitate the understanding of the domain.
So the member brings up the concerns that
Right.
In their domain, the master's job is to translate this articulation into model speak.
Right.
And then
In other words,
combine it with the
like
all
presenting
the
a
rest.
holonic kind of representation of what was said.
In context of all
Correct,
the other
yes.
demands.
So in this way, guild facilitators actually can extend into any domain, literally, and kind of provide service, if you will, facilitation service.
And here's how master fails.
Amazing.
They don't do that.
I'm good. No, with that, I think we've done an amazing session today.
And here's the distinction between master and nun and charlatan. That's their function isn't to translate the demand as is to
Right.
model speak.
It's to shape it.
They're just like, Okay, how do we commodify
to
this?
filter through back to the
system
yeah.
that is already existent,
Right.
which actually sounds very similar in process, but
Well,
Can't win them all.
let's say that's one of the ways the charlatan operates. And there are many other deceptions out there and crazy stuff, but we went over the limit, not technologically, but biologically, and so we will be
done.
packing up and piecing out. I really appreciate this this session. What were you pointing at? Let's get our final shot. This way. What are we pointing at? Let's make a.
I
we
was
gotta
pointing at that canister because I wanted it.
make that thing. Okay. So what if we point this way too? Where should our? Where should the? Let's point to the center. See, we'll point right to there's something here in the bricks that we're gonna point to and look in the camera and be very serious about it.
It's all synchronicity.
Synchronicity. And good games, ladies and gentlemen.